Yeah, you gotta look that way anyway.
Join me.
Planning going.
No. Although I did have a fun exercise this morning, putting up flowers for the tables. Like, oh, the community breakfast. What that? I know. Stranger danger. Okay. Oh. Email that came in that I flubbed. It was but that's the other thing. When you said how's the planning going, I thought you were talking about what do you call that thing? Yeah, it never stops. Sorry about that.
One. You guys need to give me 1 second so I can just get my stuff.
We've been in this.
Good evening, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone.
He tells it better. That's a
Calling to order the March 20th, 2024 regular school committee meeting. I'm sorry,
May.
did I say March? May 20th.
Okay, sounds
Meeting of the school committee. We will start the evening with public comment. I believe we have one commenter in the room and we have one virtual commenter. Each commenter, if you could please state your name and address before beginning your comment. You all have 3 minutes. Emily Prenner will give you a 30-second warning after 2.5 minutes. In the room, you can come up to the front table there would be great. Please know that we will not respond in real time in this format to your comments, but we do take them seriously, and we consider this an important part of hearing back from the community. You also always have the ability to reach out to us individually or as a group. Our contact information is on the school committee website. With that, our first commenter in the room tonight is Ema John's daughter. And thank you very much for that pronunciation included on here, because I would have not gotten that correct.
Hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Ema Johnsdotter, and I live on 156 Warren Street in Newton Center. I'm the mother of a disabled 9th grader at Newton South High School. I serve as co-chair of the Newton Commission on Disability, and this past year, I've had the honor of serving on the new NPS Anti-Ableist Curriculum Working Group, led expertly by Maria Colby. Today, I'm speaking for myself. In the context of human rights, the motto, nothing about us without us, is used to communicate that no law, policy, program, or intervention affecting people with disabilities should be decided without their full and direct participation. As all of you know, we have experienced quite a bit of unrest in the parent community this past year around what should or should not be done to lift up our disabled students' experiences in our school environment. We parents try our very best to advocate for our own kids, as I know you all do as well. But when it comes to making big decisions for our disabled children on the district level, it is imperative that we do our research on best anti-ableism practices and listen to expert advocates and educators in disability justice and lived disability experiences. This past year showed us that we don't know yet how to have conversations about disability awareness and how to be anti-ableist. And until we do, we must be willing and ready to embrace our discomfort, question our own knowledge, listen to the disability community, and seek out the experts to lead the way. We especially need all of you who are in leadership to embrace those conversations, be our advocates, and make sure that you are receiving and listening to all perspectives when those big decisions about our disabled students are made. The MPS Statement of Values and Commitment to Racial Equity talks about the importance of reviewing and revising hiring practices to be more inclusive and accessible to candidates of color, so that a diverse faculty and staff can create a sense of connectedness and belonging in the traditionally underrepresented Black community. I am asking you today to advocate for similar efforts to be made to hire disabled staff and experts in the field of disability justice and inclusion at all levels of Newton Public Schools. We need this support now more than ever, because although we parents like to believe we become experts in our own children's needs, when we are not disabled ourselves,
30 seconds.
We are simply not experts in what is best for everyone else. Our community needs to heal. We could use your support, and our disabled students need us to be responsible, to listen and learn, and not be scared to have the conversations that might change their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have one virtual commenter tonight as well, Andrew Thompson.
Hi, can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Andrew Thompson. I live at 37 Ranelagh Park in West Newton. I'm speaking as a Newton resident, a parent of an NPS student, a history and sustainability teacher and advisor at Newton South, as well as a Green Captain at South. I want to applaud you for formalizing the Green Captain role and including a stipend for it in the new contract. I'm helping to recruit and coordinate the full rollout of that position this fall throughout NPS's 21 schools, the Ed Center, and NECP. It's excellent that Newton's paying attention to green initiatives through this role, as well as in recent facilities improvements. And I'm excited for what my colleagues and I can achieve with our school communities in coming years. Many of us have been doing sustainability-related work with our students, parents, and colleagues in the schools for years, and we hope to broaden and strengthen that work moving forward. The institutional funding and support for Green Captains is a wonderful step, and I want to encourage you to help NPS be even more sustainable. Systemic change is going to make our work easier and have a much bigger impact on our schools and community. As you determine your system goals, there's so many more steps Newton should take to decrease our school district carbon footprint and improve the environment for our children, such as reducing waste, like eliminating single-use plastics and supporting reusable utensils and dishware, recovering and donating unused cafeteria food, and supporting an organics collection program in every building. Done right, this also should save the school district money in the long term. Creating an NPS climate action plan in conjunction with the city's plan, as other districts around the country have done. Making our school transportation more green, from using e-buses to encouraging biking and walking, and enforcing the Massachusetts law on no idling. Partnering with the city to ensure our school buildings are as efficient as possible, such as electrifying facilities with fossil-free HVAC. Helping our staff to embed sustainability into their curricula through relevant citywide professional development. This is hardly a full list of the possible work we could do, but it would make for a vital start. This work is not just a nice to, it's critical. We all see around us the unsettling and threatening effects of climate change and other environmental problems, and our kids feel it acutely. I hear from students who are anxious about the future, and they resent older generations for not having done more. We owe it to them to help them feel aware and empowered. On top of that, this is a social and racial justice issue. Newton may not yet suffer the worst climate effects, but our own choices for how we live and run our schools impact not only our own community, but also many others who are less fortunate. So how can NPS leadership make progress and support our grassroots efforts? Continue to support the Green Captains and listen for our reports and suggestions.
You have 30 seconds.
Formalize partnerships with city sustainability officials like Leora Silks, Juanita Trebert, and Ann Berwick on shared goals, both in terms of what we teach and where we teach it. Create concrete green goals in NPS's official documents, as cities like Denver has already done. And overall, work creatively with our school staff to find as many solutions as we can. Thank you for your time and your continued work on this issue, and I can also forward this later to give you links to places like Denver. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Lisa, that was all our speakers for tonight? Okay, great. That concludes our public comment period for the evening, and we will move on to our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and everyone at home. Lots of things are happening in May. It is the busiest month in schools. So you'll see some tired administrators back there because we are out celebrating with our community all the things that our students have achieved all year long. I wanted to just mention a couple of achievements for the district. So the Barr Foundation has offered us a generous $100,000 grant for professional development for the district. So we're working out how we will use that now. Department of Education granted a $200,000 training and upgrades grant to examine our timeout processes. And that's something that we've been working on at a policy level. So it's nice to have the additional funding to make our spaces comply with our practices. We celebrated, the mayor and I joined the first annual Asian American Pacific Islander Day last week for some of our community members. This past week, our Student Services Department, under Casey No Miller's direction, hosted our second mental health summit this year. Our deepest thanks go to the Newton Schools Foundation, who provided the funding for this important prototype day and it fulfilled our hoped for future full days of professional development plans of the future. I have included for the committee an overview of the event, and extensive participant feedback was collected. 130 staff members were trained. This is the second time that we have had this type of training this year. These were held at WPS formerly, but now this year were held at the Library for Hebrew College. So we are so grateful for that space and the breakouts meeting rooms for each of the sessions. Just a cross section of what was offered: restorative justice trainings, healing in the community discussions, restorative practices for responding to crisis and change, and other pieces on herbal and wellness measures that can be used in tandem with other practices for the school system. So just a wide variety of local practitioners participated. So there's a lot of demands on our mental health staff. And so those needs are even more nuanced for those who serve our most needy students. And they have to be able to cut across conflict resolution, change management, student health, what's happening with their families, building trust, promoting belonging and understanding. And so the day was designed to address those multi and layered needs of that particular staff population. We look forward to creating similar days for all of our staff in the future. So thank you, NSF, for giving us the seed money to try to start this. I do want you to know that we hosted a young person from Franklin who was principal for the day, and he came and had some hard-hitting meetings with the superintendent. So that was Christopher Moore. So a shout out to you, Christopher, for your, it was a pleasure to see you, and you had a lot of good things to say, and Mr. Chitty put him through the paces all day. I attended yesterday with Principals Turner and Strass, the METCO graduation celebration for our METCO seniors. Just a beautiful day of speeches and tributes, and so good to see our young people launching to some really strong postgraduate opportunities. We had a city councilor visit to Newton North to explore all the vocational technical programs there, and we had a lunch in the cafe run by students. I'm really proud of all of the student work and activity that we saw there. And I could barely peel the school committee and the city councilors out of the drafting room because it was so fascinating to watch what they were doing. See, Emily still wants to be there. I want to thank our city partners for all the time that they're investing in our trips across the schools. We have a few visits left at the end of this year, and it has been a good time for us to be bonded as leaders in the community and also see the needs of each discrete campus. Just as the weather heats up this week, which it's supposed to be unseasonably warm, I just want to let the community know that our facilities department has followed through on my request that I made in the cold days of January, which was to create additional cooling centers in all of our unair conditioned buildings. We cannot install air conditioning in all of our buildings, but we have asked the facilities department to investigate and install and test elementary cooling centers in 8 places and 2 additional middle school spaces. These 8 schools are the remaining elementary schools that have not had major renovations or don't have cooling systems. The goal of cooling centers is to provide relief for students and staff to swap into these spaces at periodic times during the day. This is in addition to those cooling stations and centers that already existed. They're placed in a variety of locations, usually the largest areas like libraries, cafeterias, and other mid-sized spaces that will give flexibility for access. The air conditioning units are about to be purchased and installed and did require additional electrical and modifications that we worked within our existing budget to complete. Public buildings and electrical outlets and minor ductwork are in process now. The end of May 2024 for final installation for every building will be the target. So you know very well that the hottest day will be this week and we will complete the installation next week. So just know that we are trying very hard to get that done so that we have cooler spaces for everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Nolan. Is there any questions or comments on the superintendent report? Oh, yes, Emily, please go ahead.
So I was very happy to see the grant about timeout rooms. And I'm just wondering, and it doesn't have to be now, but at some point I would be very much interested in knowing sort of what the timeline is and the process and what the end goal is for that.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the members? Okay, thank you, Dr. Nolan. We will move to our consent agenda, which has 3 items on it this evening. We have our regular meeting minutes from our May 6th meeting. We have a memo on some grants for acceptance, and we have a memo from Memorial Spalding Principal Tom Morris regarding a donation of a piano. Is there any items that a member would like to pull from the consent agenda for further discussion? No? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Rajiv?
I move that we vote to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Moved. Is there a second? Paul? All right. Moved by Rajiv, seconded by Paul. We'll do a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2 is yes. Ward 3 is absent. Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 8?
Yes.
And Mayor Fowler.
Yes.
Okay, that is 8-0 with 1 absent. Thank you. We'll move on to our items for discussion this evening, of which we have quite a few. First up is our Newton Jingshan School China Exchange update. And it looks like we have Toby, our 2 high school principals, Henry, Tammy, Starlou. Yep.
Star, program coordinator.
All right,
Chairs.
we're working on our choreography. Thank you.
Hold on, hold on.
So great to be here with everyone to talk about the Newton Jingshan Newton Beijing Jingshan Exchange Program, which is the first and oldest secondary exchange program between U.S. and Chinese secondary schools. And as many of you know, it was on hiatus during the pandemic. So we've been working hard over many things over the last 4 years, including the date and time at which we could restart the exchange. And so we're here to talk about that today. We're going to start with an introduction to the program, which is in the form of video, a terrific video that was created by the Jingshan Committee. We're joined today by a couple members of the Jingshan Committee and former exchange teachers, Carolyn Henderson and Nancy Fenstermacher, who are here. And Carolyn was instrumental in getting the video put together, and I think it will give a terrific background for everyone on the exchange, and then we'll go from there. Technology permitting. Yep. Is it open? No. Off the links of the video. That's it.
No, it's not this one. Oh, this one? Oh, this one.
Schools are a fantastically powerful venue for developing understanding. Schools have the formidable responsibility to prepare students to function productively in a very fast-moving, internationally connected world. And there's nothing like firsthand experience to develop that skill. The Newton Beijing Jingshan School Exchange Program began when a teacher from Newton Public Schools traveled to Beijing with her husband on a business trip in the late 1970s and happened to meet over dinner a teacher from the Jingshan School. That was the beginning. I had the extraordinary opportunity to be a teacher with the very first exchange group. I'm still amazed that the administrators on both sides said, what a great idea, let's just give it a try. Because at that time, U.S.-China relationships was tense.
I'm Ben Liebman. I am a professor at Columbia Law School, where I specialize in Chinese law. I was part of the first group of Newton students to go to Beijing in the fall of 1986. It was a pretty crazy thing to think about doing in 1986, right? I mean, very few Americans had been to China. China had only really been reopened to Americans for 7 years, 8 years at that point. China was a lot less developed than it is now. We had very few means of communication. Our group was the first group of American students that was ever authorized to live with Chinese families. We were living with a family who spoke almost no English. My host father could say, come home, and I think peanuts, and that was it. And then we went to school every day in Chinese. Every day after school, we would go somewhere in Beijing with a Chinese friend. And Beijing was a lovely city, this old city, the alleys, wonderful parks. We would bicycle around Beijing, we'd go to a park, And I think that's when I really learned Chinese. I learned from those conversations. As an American kid, especially a 6'4" American kid with somewhat blonde hair in those days, people would stop you and they wanted to talk to you. There's such interest and warmth. You could wind up having, an hour conversation with some random person on the street. There was no doubt in my mind by the time we were coming back that China was going to be central to my life.
My name is Charlotte Cotter. I was adopted from China at 5 months, so I was born there. I think I was really excited by the idea of having a host sibling. I really wanted to get to know a high school student who was living in Beijing and what their life was like. I was in Chinese language classes in high school, and that was another major pull for me, that I'd be able to really immerse myself in the language. It is scary to go to this whole other place and know that you're going to be staying there for 4 months. There were some moments of perhaps discomfort or uncertainty or getting used to sitting with contradictions, but that was one of the most rewarding parts of the experience. The Jingshan School is an elite school, so these are all students who have achieved very highly to get to where they are. Luckily, I wasn't being graded on any of their exam material. It's very challenging. I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with the Chinese language right now. Since graduation, I have been working at the Fairbank Center for Chinese Studies collection, a collection of social science materials documenting the rise of the Chinese Communist Party post-1949.
I'm Sophia Hersigen. I'm a sophomore at the University of Chicago. I started learning Chinese in middle school. A couple of the exchange students gave us a presentation, and immediately I was like, I'm gonna do this. And I did. We spent most of the time in school, shadowing classes. I developed really close relationships with my host mom and my host brother in particular. So we would usually have breakfast together every morning, usually like a bowl of noodles and an egg. So good. You become really close, even though there is that language barrier there. We took trips out to Qingdao, Chengdu, Guilin. So it was really a whole lot of China that we got to see. I remember being struck by how beautiful it was.
This is absolutely a transforming experience. They see a part of the world, a culture that they had not been part of before. They come to know people as friends. They develop great facility with a language and enormous self-confidence.
This was my first time away from home for a long time, and I think it taught me independence. It taught me that I can handle these unfamiliar situations by myself and that I can succeed and thrive in different environments. So, going to college, it's like, I can handle this, I can relate to people that have different backgrounds than me, different experiences, and learn a lot from them.
This was a vehicle for building ties, and I think succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. So many people on both sides have had their lives fundamentally changed. I am still in regular contact with my host family. I have dinner with them every time I go to Beijing.
It gave me the knowledge and the tools and the self-confidence to be able to independently navigate in Beijing, and that's something that's invaluable and that they later drew upon. I was fortunate to be able to go back to China multiple times. I taught at a rural school, and then I did a couple of language exchange programs. Of all of the different programs that I've participated in, the Newton-Beijing Jingshan Exchange Program really was the strongest in building lifelong connections between families and between students. This is something that you really can't get anywhere else.
It was one of the best decisions I ever made in high school. It really came at a time where I was figuring out who I was and what I was interested in, and it allowed me to, I think, grow and mature a lot more than I would have just staying here.
We live in a world that is more interconnected, but not necessarily better understood. It's really important that we have opportunities for exchange and education. On the Jingshan side, we have helped them develop their English language programs. On the Newton side, we were also able to build Chinese language into the curriculum. The Newton-Beijing Jingshan School Exchange Program has continued for more than 40 years because of the mutual goodwill and friendship on both sides. We have been through many bumps in the road, and it continued because we knew each other And in spite of tensions between our countries,
this type of educational interaction is more important than it's ever been. So much of the strength of the US-China relationship over the last 45 years has been built on people-to-people relationships, and so they must continue. It keeps us together, and I think makes us maybe just a little more rational in how we interact.
the Newton Beijing Jingshan School Exchange Program has become a model of what is possible, and it has been replicated in hundreds of other schools throughout the US and China. You can see movies, you can read books, you can be a tourist, but educational exchange programs where you actually live with a family in another culture and attend school, it just opens eyes, it opens worlds of possibilities. Alumni are involved with China or involved with international business, law, medicine, theater, teaching, music. Many possibilities exist. We would like to have this opportunity in the future for as many students and teachers and administrators as possible, because the world has changed so incredibly rapidly and continues to change.
All right. So I think that tells the story better than we could. We'll keep our subsequent remarks brief, and a quick update on our work to restart the exchange. We didn't introduce ourselves at the beginning. I'm Toby Romer, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Ed. I'm joined by Henry Turner and Tammy Strauss from Newton North and Newton South, and Star Liu, who's our global exchange manager and coordinator. And Star's going to just give us an update on some of the highlights in this partnership over the last 3 years, and then we'll jump quickly into our next steps.
So I'm going to continue with the friendship that we've been building through the pandemic years. So from 19 to 20 school year, our students were not able to go to China because of pandemic. However, we did a fundraiser in January at Newton North Auditorium, and we raised $13,000, and we asked the Jingshan community whether they needed any PPE, and they didn't need any at the time. So with under our Newton Public School name and Newton Beijing Jingshan School, we purchased the PPE, and the picture you can see from the video that from the top of the picture that Henry and I went to a Wellesley home, and we packed the PPE and we sent them to Wuhan directly under our names. And throughout the years, we also did online collaboration. Big shout out to Emily Donahue from Pierce Elementary School and David Minicanlo from Lincoln Elliott Elementary School. They were supposed to go in 2020, but they were not able to. So they did a PD training for English teachers at Jingshan School. We had many other collaborations that involved athletic departments and world language departments. So I really appreciate the department heads, Pat and Mike, the athletic directors, and Suzanne Murphy-Ferguson, Chris Wood, and the retired Newton North World Language Department Chair, Nancy Marinucci. So in 22 to 23, we did an online administrator meeting. That was the first time our administrators were able, and including me, were able to meet the Jingshan administrators online. And that was to honor Jim Marini, Friend of the Exchange Award. So during that meeting, Jingshan principal invited us to go this April to restart the program. Just one thing about the PowerPoint template. So we chose the lotus flower. In Chinese, it sounds the same as peace. So hopefully that will bring us peace throughout the world through this program.
Thank you, Star. Star is very humble. She's been working nonstop for the last 3.5 years to make this day possible when we're prepared to restart the exchange and actually get our students heading back to Beijing and to the Jingshan School. And some of the additional work she's been doing behind the scenes is summarized on the left-hand side of this slide, outlining all of the work that needed to be done in terms of, she mentioned, reestablishing the connections and partnership between our school leaders. We needed to update and reapply for State Department approval for the exchange program. And frankly, after such a long time in existence, the program has needed some rethinking and revising. We've been able to, through this pause, take the time to do that, and STAR's been doing a lot of that work behind the scenes, as well as some additional improvements to ensure that we could learn from past experiences and continue to improve the experiences for both our students and faculty headed to Beijing, and the Jingshan students and faculty headed there. So that culminated in this spring, the administrative trip that the four of us are here today took to Beijing, and we were able to make those connections in person with the school leaders and key staff at the school. And I know Nancy and Carolyn have been preaching for so long, based on their experiences, the importance of interpersonal connection and friendship as a foundation for the exchange and the learning that comes out of it. We were able to have spend many days visiting classes, spending time at the school, but also meeting with the administrative team there, reviewing plans to restart the exchange in the 24-25 school year. We got to visit several different schools while we were there and continuing observing classes and cultural learning. And Henry and Tammy were able to take additional trips to Xi'an and Guilin. I'm working on my pronunciation. I'm getting there. So this is an important part of that reestablishment of the program. So Henry's going to summarize what the trip itself does look like once we get our students in going.
So I'll say from my experience on the trip, it was having had several meetings in my years with Jingshan School, it was really impactful to see that there is a school on the other side of the world that loves Newton. And every teacher who has been to Newton was asking us about particular people, about what was going on in our buildings. They truly care about what's going on in our community. So our exchange is a 4-month exchange. In a typical year, students from Jingshan come to Newton from September to January, and then Newton students go from January to May. We said that the last cohort had stopped in 2020. Our students were actually about to go in January. However, we had some housing challenge for students. So COVID was not the reason, but fortunately, I guess the housing issue happened because our students did not go. But the idea for us, and Tammy will speak more about it, is for our students to kick off in the spring, or spring of next year. And then the typical day for students, for our students, will be that they will take Chinese classes when they're there. We observed several classes, high school as well as English. Particularly, we saw observed math classes to see whether our students who we believe could do the math that was happening in the classroom, but the Chinese would be really hard to understand, versus taking taking elementary school level Chinese classes so that they can understand the language. And that was one of the issues that we had to work through, because some of the feedback was that our students were craving more Chinese acquisition when they were there, and the high school level Chinese was a little bit too challenging. And so they would take Chinese level classes. Many would be in the elementary school level, so they can develop the acquisition, but also tailoring some of their schedule for them for their academic needs. In the PM, they'll take, in the afternoon, they'll take classes with new teachers who are there, focused on art, music, other cultural components. And then the evening was another piece that we worked through with our partners at Jingshan, in that there is a lot of homework that the students have to do at Jingshan. And sometimes some of the social pieces were a challenge for Newton students. And so we have a much better plan for supporting our students so that they'll have academic work to do, so that while students are doing homework, our students will have work to do as well. And also knowing that the ideas for both exchanges, both when they're here and when our students are there, is for students to have more cultural exploration as well. So that's certainly going to be a requirement for hosts, is to make sure the students are getting that immersion that is the purpose of the exchange.
And just in terms of next steps and where we are right now, like Toby said, and I cannot emphasize the amount of work that Star has put into this, including having to deal with the three of us for a couple of weeks, which she was very nervous about, but didn't want to tell us. So right now we are in the phase where we are currently recruiting students. So Star has been at both schools. She's been running wind blocks. She's been going into classrooms to try and recruit students, and kind of put her feelers out there. And she's also running family sessions. So she's in this active phase of recruiting students in the summer. So this summer, there's something that we call bounder bonding that about 20 minutes ago, I did not know what it meant. But apparently this is a term that we coined through this exchange, where it will be all of our students who are selected to go on this trip will be bonding with the adult chaperones on the trip, who will be Emily and David from our elementary schools. So that is set to happen this August. September through November, we are preparing our kids to really go on that trip. And then early next year in 2025, January through May, our students will be in Beijing, which will be a pretty phenomenal experience for them, I am sure. And then towards the end of next academic year, they will come back. There will be presentations, whether it's in elementary schools, whether it's public presentations here. So that's kind of like our timeline and where we're going with this.
And that's it. We're excited to share the progress, and I know this is a very important part of the Newton Public Schools culture and history, as well as our future going forward, as well as our larger investment in global programs and exchanges. And I think what we shared here today represents well to the overall benefits of all the exchanges that you work with Star and that take place out of North and South. So glad to share.
And I just want to say thank you to you, Mr. Romer, in particular, for taking my place at the trip. He was not expecting to go. I did not think it was appropriate in the first 5 minutes of my new role here to go. So Mr. Romer took that on for me. So thank you. It's very important in these trips that people from the highest ranking offices possible attend. So it is my intention to serve the community in that way in the future, but thank you for taking that on.
Thank you, everyone. Questions from members? Oh, Rajiv?
What are we seeing in terms of student interest levels, and also concerns that which we may want to work to alleviate?
The student interest level, I hosted one information session for families last Wednesday. There were 22 families, and this Wednesday I'm hosting the second session. So I don't know how many families are coming. And last week I went to Newton South and Newton North wind blocks. So Newton North, we had about, Henry, would you say like 15 to 20 people? Yeah, close to 20 students. And Newton South, we had students coming from outside of Chinese class. From Mr. Williams' newsletter, they learned about it since the program is open to everybody. So I will report the number later, but we're taking 6 students, did we mention? We're taking 6 students. Yeah.
The challenges in the past have been for particularly students taking AP classes who want to take the exam at the end of the year. And so I think we answered the questions of the students there, for families there. We have actually, they unenroll from NPS when they are there and enroll in classes when they're there. So that's how this is an immersion program. So they're there for 4 months, enrolled in Jingshan, and then come back. And so we just had to answer some of the nuances to that. They still get credits through NPS. They still get their courses through NPS. And we'll get support if they're taking, so for example, they want to take an AP test, we'll be able to support them. But they're also making the decision to immerse themselves for 4 months outside of NPS, right? So there is a give and take that's there. So I would say that's one of the bigger challenges that students and families have to consider.
Yep. Tamika?
Thank you. So I really wanted to give Star and others a chance to plug the way that you assist families to finance your educational exchanges like this. I know you've been doing woman's work over a number of years to help defray some of those financial concerns. So talk about that a little bit. And I'm particularly thinking about Guelph.
Okay, thank you, Tamika. So we have two sources of funds for Jingshan Exchange Program, actually. We do have an endowment fund that can provide certain financial aid or exchange-related costs. And we have another one, which is the Jennifer Price Global Education Leadership Fund, which provides on a need basis to families who are struggling or who would like to go but need some help with finances. So every international travel program, all the application has the Guelph application attached to it. So all students are able to take advantage or be able to receive support.
I would just underscore that by saying no student will be turned away based on need. The goal of Guelph, as well as the supplemental funds you mentioned from the Jingshan Committee, is that any student who wants to participate will be able to participate regardless of finances, right?
You. Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you in particular, Star, for all the hard work you do on this.
Thank you, everyone.
Our next item is a presentation on elementary MTSS.
Very.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'm Aisha Farag, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education.
I'm Maria Colby, SEL coach.
And we are here this evening. We think this is very exciting news that we're sharing with you all, and to share some significant progress that we've made this year in support of important district priorities that have been identified both through my own entry plan that concluded in the spring of 2022, and certainly observations that Dr. Nolan has made and has been advocating for since coming to the district. The elementary MTSS work, just in terms of a little bit of background and context, began in the district several years ago. And in its start, it was focused heavily on SEL. Simultaneously, though, things began to emerge as we worked in terms of the content areas to develop guidance and support for tiered instruction. And this was really important foundational work for each of our 15 elementary schools. However, we recognized that we needed to have a more focused, comprehensive approach to align all of the systems, the expectations, the resources across the entire district for all elementary schools. So we've made terrific progress this year. As we'll detail, there's additional work to be done. There is also, just in terms of context, important to know that there's a shared interest with our NTA partners in continuing to examine and strengthen the elementary school day. And we have committed through this latest contract to a joint working group focused on a deeper dive into this topic. Our first meeting will be in June and is slated to continue throughout the course of next year. As you know, this is related to our presentation today, relates to one of our very important district goals. And we wanted to start by talking about what is MTSS. And MTSS, I think the analogy that I like to use, and there are a lot of different ones out there, but I think of it as creating the garden, right? It's the container. And all of the plants that are in this garden need some things in common that we need to make sure are present and available for all of the plants of all varieties that are growing in this garden: soil, water, sunlight. But different plants may have different needs, right? One of them may need to be watered twice a day. Certain varieties might need certain poles and stakes. I'm not a gardener, so this, but I know something.
You're doing a heck of a job.
in order to support their growth, right? Some need more nutrients and fertilizing. And so thinking about the system, MTSS is about thinking about how the system is set up to ensure that all of our students thrive. It's really, systems work.
Wonderful. So this slide outlines our timeline of the MTSS work that occurred over this school year, over the past 2 years. So thinking about those conversations around MTSS planning and infrastructure really starting in the 22-23 school year, which led to the formation of the elementary MTSS steering committee in the summer when we met for the first time. And this school year, from October to May, we've really been dedicated to addressing the priorities that were identified by that MTSS steering committee through the work of multiple working groups. And in June, we will be looking to complete the DESE self-assessment again to be able to determine new focus areas for the upcoming school year.
And I just insert that as you think about goal 2 tonight, which is our last agenda item, this is a huge portion of it. And the pre and post assessment, one of our members asked, so how do you know what kind of progress you're making? So that's one indicator that Maria is talking about here. And we're not done yet. So we'll keep doing that self-assessment of MTSS best practices and comparing against our actual reality.
Yes, absolutely. So it's important to note that the progress that we have made, which we will be outlining in this presentation, is representative of significant interdepartmental collaboration between elementary education, teaching and learning, and student services. And this is by design. We have needed the input and the expertise of each department in both that overarching steering committee, but also in each of the working groups that are outlined on this slide. So an example of this, if we're thinking about the elementary scheduling working group that's on this slide, we had our assistant superintendents, curriculum coordinators, representatives from student services, ELL, SEL department principals. This was a group that we needed those various viewpoints to be able to do the work and to be where we are today. Additionally, as Aisha mentioned, looking to next year, that elementary school day working group will also be an important place that we can gather input and feedback from elementary educators in how to strengthen our MTSS structures and systems, and ensuring that this cross-department collaboration continues to be at the heart of all of our work on this topic. Additionally, the implementation committee working group was expanded in March to include our NTA leadership, which has been just a critical piece of moving forward. So this section will provide an overview of the specific areas of progress this year. So starting with the working group, the first working group, this working group achieved its goal of creating a curriculum and data matrix. So what on earth is that? This document has two very important purposes. The first purpose is to define very clearly both the core Tier 1 instruction that all students access and our intervention in curriculum and resources across SEL, math, and literacy. So this starts from defining that very clearly. Then, once we have that codified, we are able to then, and because we did this by February, we were able to turn our attention to equity of student access across all of our 15 elementary schools for those intervention curricula and resources. So significant purchases were able to be made for literacy and SEL in particular, made possible by the use of multiple grants and one-time funds. And this is truly a really exciting outcome of this paper document that was created by our literacy, math, and SEL coordinators, and as well as other voices across those different departments that I mentioned, that we will be able to state in the fall that a student in first grade that's requiring literacy intervention will have access to the same evidence-based tool at a school that's across the city, that we're having that consistency of curriculum across our schools, and that our individuals that are providing those interventions are going to be trained in those specific materials. So that's something that's very exciting to think about moving into the fall. The second purpose of this document is that data, so curriculum/data matrix. And that's where we outline the specific data points across literacy, math, and SEL and how they speak to each other to help us inform our work related to student achievement. And this will interface with the topic we're going to discuss in a bit, which is the MTSS data management system. So moving to the second working group, and thinking about Aisha's reference to MTSS work as systems work, it's important to note that an elementary or any level scheduling process is a key system that has the potential to be a true facilitator of all students thriving in a school. And so our second working group really did such a thoughtful examination of our current scheduling process for the elementary level and explored the impact of a shift to a block scheduling model. Determining that a process that is rooted in that block scheduling would better set the conditions to achieve the student outcomes that we're also determined to actualizing. So with that decision made, the change effort began. And with the support of our third working group, which was that implementation working group. I had the pleasure of working with 15 elementary schools to create their grade level schedules that prioritize the components on this slide. So our 15 elementary schools, through various scheduling team structures, created schedules that did three core things. One, they blocked content times across a grade. So a fifth grade class, all three classes have math at the same time. They have their EL content block at the same time. They have the all block at the same time. They have science social studies at the same time. So that was true for every grade level. Then it staggered content and intervention blocks across the day. So we put math at 6 different times across the school day for grades. So kindergarten would not have math at the same time as fifth grade, or fourth grade would not at the same time as third. Intervention blocks would not overlap with each other. And the purpose of those two pieces were to increase student access to support and enrichment. Additionally, within these grade level schedules, our grade level teams have common planning time 4 times a week. And for almost all of our educators, this is an increase from 0 to 4 times a week. And this will increase the quality and effectiveness of our collaboration. So this is a picture or this slide captures how central educator voice was to this process. So at each school, all 15 schools, we started with that blank chart paper, which is quite worse for wear now. This was the first one, so it did not look like that anymore, having gone to 15 places. And we start with the blank place, and we start with adding magnetic pieces that are the specialist blocks and the lunches for the school. And that's like a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for kindergarten, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday for first grade, and so forth. Then the guiding question that these scheduling teams at the building level asked themselves, the guiding question was, given our current instructional minutes, what should the flow of the school day be for each grade level of learners? And then in real time, as we put up the magnets, for first grade, we're adding math block, content block, science and social studies, foundation, small group time. As we're making these, we're also educators are able to still live those 3 priorities on the previous slide, making sure you can do a quick look. There's light blue isn't at the same time anywhere up there, right? We're staggering our blocks across the day while still centering that student experience as we look. So that second picture is a final product of where one of our schools landed. So our 15 schools have gone through this process of creating grade level schedules, and now our specialist, special educator, ELL educator, and interventionist schedules are currently being made and facilitated from support at the district level. They're being mapped against this. And so we anticipate we will be ending the year with all these schedules set and ready to implement for September. Yeah.
That brings us to talking about MTSS data management system, which we're an area where we've made some progress on a topic that we've been looking to gain some traction on for a while. If we think prior to the pandemic, the district data team was involved in regular meetings looking at 2 pieces of things. One had to do with a product, looking at a user-friendly data management system that would provide educators at every level with readily accessible data that was easy to use, that would help them to guide their instruction and intervention. And then the second area of focus of the data team at that time was about identifying the data literacy skills that we needed. What is it that we want all educators to know and be able to do when you have access to the data? And so that's been a need that we've identified. And obviously the pandemic had an impact on that forward progress, but we are making some progress now. The need for a strong data management system has been reinforced by the direct experience of the educators in our schools as they've been doing the work to build stronger multi-tiered systems of support. And we had direct feedback from several teams who looked at products and then had on the basis of their reactions to one in particular called EduClimber. We then invited all teams from all 15 schools to take a look at what it offered. And on the basis of that feedback, we are pleased to have selected EduClimber as the elementary district MTSS data management system. And we're so very grateful for the teacher and the principal input that helped to inform that decision. And we're looking forward. We think this is going to be a useful tool. The other piece that's related here is that it has to do with, and you've heard Dr. Nolan talk about the needs-based allocations and how could we take a look at the needs of schools as we're thinking about budget priorities. And that dovetailed really well with conversations the elementary team has been having for the past couple of years. That's raised questions about how we resource the schools and whether or how we might be able to identify what are the resources that we have to make sure every school has, and provide additional or tailored resources on the basis of student needs. And this was certainly an area that Dr. Nolan detailed in her entry plan, and the allocation of the 7.0 additional FTEs to support elementary MTSS in FY25 allows us to not only begin this programming across all 15 schools, but to provide some additional initial support for the 5 schools where student needs have been deemed the greatest. Each of those 5 schools, it's Cabot, Countryside, Horace Mann, Lincoln Elliott, and Underwood, are developing plans to increase student access to interventions and support utilizing that extra FTE. Additionally, this spring, we are beginning our school-based data presentations through the State of the Schools presentations that Dr. Nolan has mentioned. And that process, by looking at that together in that way, is going to help us to identify both the themes across the district, as well as needs that are specific to each of the schools, and consider those needs as we budget in the future.
Okay, so we're going to end with looking ahead to next year. So speaking to progress and how this informs our database decision-making for the fall, this presentation, selfishly for myself, was a really welcome opportunity to reflect on the progress of this year. And for myself, I see this as like a confluence of a couple different things that came together. We had this call to action from Dr. Nolan. We have Aisha's leadership and facilitation, this tireless work of our working groups. Feels like we are constantly meeting, and I mean that with love, but it's never ending. And then the school level partnerships that we've had most recently. These 4 pieces coming together have resulted in a truly tremendous progress against the backdrop of a very complex year for Newton Public Schools. So our steering committee will officially complete this DESE self-assessment that Dr. Nolan was mentioning in June. We completed it last August, and so this is our end of year look to look at how we've gone across the year. And so we will certainly do this together as a group, anyone listening, but we're giving a little bit of a sneak peek here. It's projective, of course, but these are foundational structural areas that we anticipate will be moving from a 0, which is not in place, or 1 partially in place, to 3 fully in place within the course of a year, or less than a year. And so despite, we know that a change process of this magnitude, we expect to take time. We are very proud of what we've been able to accomplish this year, and how the work that we've done has been how we've set ourselves up for that continued work in FY25.
The work is not done. There are next steps ahead. You can see the list here that we've put together, lots to focus on. The MTSS steering committee will continue into next year, and we'll be meeting to look at our continued progress and what needs to happen. This will include monitoring the implementation of the new schedules that we mentioned, supporting the use of the new MTSS data management system, clarifying roles and responsibilities, the menu of positions that exist in elementary education, and how they support student needs, and other work as identified and outlined in the DESE MTSS framework. At the same time as that's going on, we will also have that elementary school day working group running, and they'll be meeting regularly to examine the elementary school day and ways to improve the learning experience and outcomes for students, continuing to focus on that clear and pragmatic guidance. Some things we dream up don't actually work when you try to make it happen. And so that want to make sure that anything we come up with is truly workable, and to increase teacher planning time to effectively prepare and collaborate to meet student needs. And so we expect to bring recommendations to the school committee next spring. In conclusion, systematically implementing the structures and the resources we have discussed tonight is essential foundational work necessary to ensure the consistency across our 15 elementary schools and to monitor student progress and needs. This, coupled with the state of the schools process and the steps we've outlined for FY25 that you see here, will inform future recommendations and budgetary implications. And I just want to close by saying the collaborative nature of this work across departments on a personal note, has been a highlight of my year. The opportunity to work with folks across the 3 departments, cross-pollinate ideas and perspectives has been truly amazing. And I have to give a huge shout out to this lady here, Maria, who has been a real workhorse behind the scenes, getting things done, meeting after meeting, and helping to facilitate this process and keep it moving along, even amidst the many priorities that are happening. And so I'm really grateful to you, Maria, for all of your work.
I just want to thank you both. Just to extend the gardening metaphor, as an avid beekeeper, you two are the bees that are cross-pollinating that process. So anyone wants to see pictures of my bee children, let me know. But thank you for pushing the agenda. And also, this is backed up on purpose for a discussion with student services and our SEL intervention work, because if we get the tier 1 and the tier 2 and the tier 3 right, this should have an impact on how student services in general are delivered, including special education support services. If we don't get this right, a lot of things become special education concerns that don't need to be. And that's about alignment and agreement. What does an interventionist do for all our children? And when students look like this, what happens to them? And so that's a social contract that we are making with our families. And I just want to say thank you for how much we've been able to accelerate it this year. And I also want to thank our Newton Teacher Association partners, who have been just tremendous thought partners and supportive in this work, and really keeping our eyes on what's best for children.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Doctors Farag and Colby. And thank you for the gardening analogy, because typically we only get like the processed food analogy from Dr. Nolan. So this was nice to move up the supply chain and, talk about tomatoes instead of the tomatoes going on the burger and the yummy. Questions from the members unrelated to food analogies? Paul, and then Emily.
Thanks. Apologies that I didn't submit these in advance because I didn't know I would have them until I heard what we just heard. First, terrific presentation, and I think the correct term is bravi, right?
Sure.
Dual feminine bravo, right?
I think you're right.
I think it is. Anyway, really well done. You said, Aisha, three questions, I think quick answers. you're going to bring something back to us next spring, and I missed what you said you were going to bring back to us.
So the work of the the working group that we have established through the contract with the NTA will be bringing recommendations. Part of that work will be to bring recommendations that help to support the ideas that come out of that support student learning and outcomes, clear scheduling guidance, as well as plans for how to address increasing planning time for teachers.
Okay.
To support student needs.
Thanks for clarifying that. You know, I have to ask this. In your talk about the elementary school schedule, was there any consideration of changing the lunch period?
So that issue, I knew where you were going after. Yeah. Where is he going? Oh, I know where he's going. That is an issue that.
So predictable, Dr.
About
Null.
food, just
Yeah.
saying.
Yes.
So that issue will be discussed through this joint labor management group and through the working group, because there are a number of pieces that we need to look at, right? And can look at the research, look at developmental characteristics of students at each grade, look at the content guidance, and then put that all together and say, where does this put us? What is the vision of the elementary experience that we want for our students, and that's supported through research, and then what is needed in order to execute that.
Okay. Thank you. And the final question really got to what you were discussing, Dr. Nolan, which is it reasonable to expect that upon the successful implementation of what you've described, that there would be a reduction in the number of students who end up in special ed compared to where we've been?
So I think that those are to be foreseen. But if you look at the research and what multi-tiered systems of support work leads to, when we are more proactive around meeting student need, we are able to tease out the students that needed that 6 to 8 week intervention that was really targeting what they were struggling with related to some area of phonemic awareness. And if we are progress monitoring efficiently, if we are at the end of that intervention saying, okay, did they meet their goal line? Which in EduClimber, we're going to be able to see. Did they meet their goal line? Okay. If they did, that's telling us that with that level of support and intervention, they got to where they needed to be. Maybe we continue another cycle. Maybe we don't. Those are going to be individual student decisions, but it's going to increase our effectiveness and also our confidence that when we are recommending a student to be evaluated for special education, that we can say unequivocally that they are requiring not one intervention cycle. They are requiring specialized instruction that needs to be delivered systematically across time to continue to address needs that they have, versus if we don't have those systems and structures in place for students to receive those 6 to 8 weeks, or an SEL, it's often less, 4 to 6 week intervention periods. Literacy, sometimes it's a little longer. We need that data, and we need to be able to see how effective those interventions are. So for some students, they will have their needs met within this tiered system without a referral to special education. And for some students, they will have 2 to 3 cycles of intervention, and we will say, okay, we need to still move forward with testing. But it will allow that to be an informed decision in a way that we haven't set the conditions in our district systematically yet for that to happen consistently.
There's a couple pieces related to that. And one is that anecdotally, we have seen that in schools that have really been investing in these kinds of systems, that they have seen a decrease in their referrals and the numbers of referrals that are found where students are found eligible, right? So that there's a higher percentage of when by the time the student goes through the referral process, they have enough data to support that there is in fact a disability likely. The other piece is that just from in a perfect world, I'm just going to say in a perfect world, we would have the resources to really overinvest in our general education resources to really strengthen these kinds of systems, knowing that the needs have already been identified in the special education arena that you need to carry for a while as well. And then as these take hold, that we would see we wouldn't see the pipeline to special education. We would see that dwindle, right? And we would see the resources allocated to most effectively to students who we really at that point have a clear picture that this is these are difficulties that are grounded in disability.
And the other piece too, thinking about the scheduling process, is that is setting the condition for a universal design in a way that we haven't necessarily been able to do here before. So if we have 3 grade levels that are teaching math at the same time, we're able to more effectively provide accommodations and provide small group learning and provide within the world of general education much more for students. And that's in increasing that universal access is something that can have benefits across all student populations, including students that are supported by ELL educators, students that are supported by IEPs. So that's another factor of this. It's not just the structures related to intervention. It's also setting the conditions at the tier 1 level to live universal design in our schools.
I can just add too, I think there's a trust component to this with families. If we spell out that these are the things that you can expect in tiers 1, 2, and 3, right now, as a parent in Newton, you may think that special ed is your only tool that you have if your child is struggling, because we have not aligned and discussed our resources in such a way to increase parent confidence. So I think once we have implemented this with rigor and we report on it to you, parents will know what to expect, and hope that will build the kind of trust that we'll be tracking, right? Who's asking for referrals? Right now, parents ask for a lot of referrals that may or may not be necessary if we are giving other information sooner so parents know how their kids are doing.
Thank you, Emily, and then Amy.
I just want to make a quick comment and say thank you for the incredible amount of work. I know where we were a year ago, and the changes and updates and the whole scheduling piece. I am so excited to be here in a year from now and see the fruits of your labors, because I know that this has been a long time coming and something that we've been trying to change. And I am thrilled that we're at this point. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and then Rajiv.
I'm going to try to put my parent hat on more so than my educator hat. And I'm thinking about how different a block schedule will be in terms of our student experiences. And I can see there are a lot of systems in place to prepare and support educators who will also experience a really different rhythm to their day. What can we as parents and caregivers do to prepare our kids for how different their school day might feel?
It's a great question. So it's something that our implementation committee is going to be tackling next in terms of the resources that we're providing educators, as well as like what's our outward facing messaging. And so we can certainly share quite a bit of that. I think we can learn from our 2 elementary schools that have done this work and have reported very minimal shift in student experience, in the sense that students are going to increase consistency in their days, right? Their Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays are going to have the same flow. So their bodies are going to, learn that around 9:15, we're starting math. They're going to feel that piece. So there's that element of consistency and structure. And, I'm sure that there are individuals that may need a little scaffolding that liked having math at different times of the day. I'm not sure. So I think that messaging is something our implementation group will be ready to provide some resources for. I think students, again, learning from those 2 schools, in terms of student experience, they're going to access they're going to have more adults in their classrooms that can provide support and enrichment. They're going to have a consistent flow of their day. I think we will continue to address this, but I don't think we should expect large shifts in expectation for our students or challenges for that perspective.
The key things that I think about, and this is a little bit off topic, but really is as continued work, is how are we communicating with families about who are the people who are interacting with your child and teaching your child. So if your child is actually leaving their teacher's room and is in a reading group with a few kids from their classroom and they're doing it with the teacher next door, That's a good thing for families to know. And as well as the consistency with which we report on intervention work and progress in intervention work. And that's all stuff for the future to continue to work on and strengthen that communication piece with families, so that when the child comes home and says, I worked with Dr. Colby today, and you're like, who's Dr. Colby? You know who Dr. Colby is, and the kind of work that you're focused on together.
That was my next question. So thank you. That's a great answer. Because I do find that, you sign a form at the beginning of the year that says like, sure, my kid can do lunch bunch. And then like, maybe they do it. And you only know if you know to ask them sometimes. And so even just how simple it is to get that weekly calendar at the beginning of the year that tells me when PE is, I would love to have the same kind of a calendar for academics so that I can say like, how was math this morning? Right? Like the more carrots you can dangle, I feel like the more information you can get back. So that would be great. I noticed under next steps that you'll be implementing new math benchmarking assessments K through 8.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can. So we will have Renaissance Star Math CBMs and benchmarking assessments. I know you love that, but I do too. And it is the feed into EduClimber, and it was reviewed by all of our groups because iReady is another companion that we could have used, and other tools. So lots of great discussion and testing of those tools. Because we are such an important player in the scene, Renaissance has also thrown in all of the literacy materials for our exploration as well. So we are going to have a lot of educators looking at those products to determine if those work for us in addition to the ones we currently have.
Then my last comment is just, I see so much how intervention drives this, but I also love what you said about gen ed and giving educators time to actually collaborate, I think is the best tier 1 intervention. So really well done.
Thank you. Rajiv?
Thank you. Great progress. It's nice to see this, and as always, it's an information-packed presentation. So I have one tactical question, and then another couple that are, I think, broader and have been somewhat covered. So tell me if they've been fully covered. On a practical note, we have 7 additional FTEs, and for the upcoming school year, do we have a sense of, first, would they be working across schools? And then are we looking at specialization? So there'd be a breakdown between math, literacy, and SEL. And do we have a sense of what that is right now, or is that still being figured out?
So right now, some pieces of that 7.0 are being allocated to each of the 5 schools that we designated, right? So each school is working with a 1.0 increase in their allocation, most of which are focusing on intervention services, are looking at, and we're finishing up those planning. Each school is looking at their data. They're developing a theory of action as to how to address an area of need, and then looking at how to resource that appropriately. The other piece of the 7.0 is looking at how to provide the ongoing coaching and support for the shifts in practice that we're looking to make, right? Both in terms of supporting the schedule implementation, but the MTSS meetings at the grade level, the data literacy components that we're looking to develop. And so how we need to provide a level of support that's ongoing in order to make sure that things take shape, right? So we've all had the experience of leading something. Yeah, it's great. Here it is. And then here's something else I need to focus on now. Okay, go ahead, do this. And it falls apart because we haven't provided enough structure and support for it. And so part of what we're looking at right now with that is how to provide that dedicated support so that the work that we're doing really takes root.
That's good.
And becomes a new way of doing our work.
On the broader front, ensuring that all the fruits and vegetables get enough water, or the requisite amount of water.
Yes.
So I feel like some of the challenges we've had within NPS with programs have included several things that you've talked about a little bit. One is consistency across schools. because to really make this effective, all 15 elementary schools need to have consistency, the rigor, and it's great to hear you talk about making sure there's a system of support in place for the educators. But I feel like consistency is going to be critical in this sense, just to kind of get to the next thing, which is, I think Dr. Nolan referred to this, trust from the parents. My experience has been, if you have a child that's struggling, the single outlet has been to say what support can be put in place based on an IEP, sometimes a 504 plan. And what we're looking for here is a real shift in the mindset for parents. And when we think about it that way, you need to build that trust. You need to communicate with them, like, here's exactly what's happening in terms of supporting your child. We're going through 1, 2, 3 cycles of focused support. And here's what will happen if that's not having an impact. Here's how we'll be communicating back to you, looking at assessments. And if it is having an impact, we can show you the data if your child has made that progress. But it's going to be a significant shift in mindset for parents. And there will need to be some kind of change management effort for that. Just to make it successful, make sure the trust is there. And alongside that, I think also for administrators and heads of department or educators to supervise other educators, because again, I know you're doing a lot of professional development related to this, but the kind of a reflexive action that might be based on many years of excellent teaching and administration in Newton is going to take some work to kind of unpack and restructure. The IEP is not the automatic next step, but then what is, how do we communicate it, and so on for administrators as well. So this is great, and I just feel like there's a lot of outreach, trust building, and communication that'll be required as the nuts and bolts go in place. Tell us how we can help, right?
We will keep you informed for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tamika?
Thank you. So following up on Anna's point about building trust, and Maria, your point about mapping and tracking student progress over time. I know parents are going to be yearning and hungry for accessing all of that. So talk about the current vision for how we share this data with families, in what time, at what points in the school year, because again, if we're looking to really change the mindset of how we address student needs and how we look at the need for special education, we're going to have to give a little bit, show a lot, and then hopefully get that yield in return. So talk about that.
Absolutely. So I'll start by saying thinking about that data and intervention matrix, which I don't know, we'd come up with like a flashier title or something that doesn't feel particularly exciting. But when we think about implementing that right now, it is a very exciting piece of paper that has facilitated purchases and our alignment of thinking across the elementary level. But what we are moving into in the fall is making that document alive. So the step one of our implementation curriculum that either we've ordered or we've bolstered, depending whether you're math, literacy, or SEL, the first step is the training for the school level individuals on that. So we have plans for that in September to be able to provide systematic training for the new intervention curricula and how those intervention curriculum are going to interface directly with EduClimber. We're going to be doing that in September with every single, so thinking about within literacy, those are our literacy specialists, our literacy intervention teachers, our early literacy aides. For math, that is our math coaches, our math interventionists. For SEL, that's our mental health health teams along with our SEL interventionists. So those are the individuals on the ground in the schools that need to get the training, but also in the actual intervention systems, our intervention programs themselves, which many of them know, like this is not new for some of them, and for some it is new. So we need to make sure we have that strong baseline of what these interventions are. And part of that training will involve progress monitoring in EduClimber. So that will be part of that September. So we will be ending September with every elementary provider within those core groups having been trained on the intervention curriculums, and also on how when you create an intervention for a student, how to do that in EduClimber, how that goal line is set, what's the baseline, where are we looking to get to. And so that is something that that is our year one of implementation with this system, is what we've, and as the initial talks have been. So thinking about what families can expect, we can outline that much more next year in terms of much more communication, but that, within the system, when that intervention is created, it is assigned to a provider who's going to put in that progress monitoring data either weekly or every other week. And then depending on, whether the student is on track within their goal line, that's something that someone might get an alert, like, oh, we need to look at that again. I mean, this is a very dynamic system that's going to facilitate a lot of really excellent work for us. And at the end of that intervention cycle, it's going to prompt us to make a decision in the system on whether we're continuing or not. And each intervention that we create in the system has a parent report that can be accessed. As well as, the individuals that are providing the support can also access. So this is something that training will happen in September, and then we can be messaging as a district in terms of when, the first cycles of intervention generally don't start till the end of September, beginning of October, depending when our universal screeners happen. So we have some time in the fall to think through how to support our schools in being able to share out those reports with families.
I think, so I think that we're going to need to do some work around the hows and the wins and how those lifts happen. And that's maybe it's another step on our next steps list. And I think then too, prioritizing what can we be realistic in accomplishing on what timeline, and as it relates to any number of different things that we've talked about tonight, and thinking about the implementation. How do we support that implementation? How do we make sure that it's taking hold? How are we being really strategic about what next steps are most important, and asking for patience as we work through details and learning, as we seek to make some shifts in practice, building on so many things that are good and right and helpful and working, while also building some new systems to help be more efficient and more effective, and collaborate in support of our student needs.
Oh, yep.
Again, this is fascinating and really terrific. Is there anything here for the kids who we used to call gifted and talented, who were above grade level,
so
for whom intervention could help them be even more so?
You may have noted in the next step slide that one of the bullets references additional work to examine enrichment opportunities. And so part of the work that's planned is designed to think about extension and the role of extension at each grade level.
And work that's already started. Our math department has spent their last several PLCs looking into this topic of what enrichment can be provided during these intervention block times in the area of math for students that align with state standards, align with our curriculum. And so there's a good foundation for this work, and then we'll be strengthening it in the upcoming year as well.
Which then prompted a middle school conversation with our math coaches there about what is the middle school equivalent, since the win block extension time already exists there. So how can we expand it's catchy, this whole gardening thing, so that we can grow those same types of experiences at our middle schools.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much, both of you. Appreciate all the work.
And the gardening.
And the gardening. Okay, our next item for discussion is a SEL K-8 report.
Also under goal 2 of the district plan.
Those of you keeping track.
Right. You're playing bingo at home.
Hey, everyone. I think Stephen is pulling up our slides. Is that accurate, Stephen? Okay. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to my colleagues to my left. I have Dr. Jordana Lesperance, who is psychologist extraordinaire at Bigelow. And we have Mr. Jesse Krodig, social work extraordinaire. However, he works in the role of a coordinator of elementary support stabilization and MTSS at the elementary level. And they will present to us tonight an update on where we are with SEL and mental health in our K-8, again, in line with what the committee has asked for with regard to updates on district goals. Next slide, please. So you may recall that last spring, we put up this slide that has what the vision of MTSS should look like in our eyes as it relates to SEL and mental health. It lists out the positions that are involved. There is some overlap. And then as you look, it also highlights the intensity with which the tiers increase as students' needs present themselves. So I just wanted to put that there. Again, materials are out there so folks can see that. But this part really, I think, dovetails nicely off of the previous presentation.
So this is a reminder of what we showed you the last time we were here in the fall. These were the trends that we were seeing. So we just wanted to give you a quick reminder of that before we moved into what we're doing now. So at the middle school level, at all 4 middle schools, we are using a program called Sown to Grow. All the middle schools have an advisory program, which is a small group led by a teacher, and it meets every day. There's one day of the week, our shorter day, it's a shorter period, but it meets for about 13 to 18 minutes, depending on what's happening. And it's a time where students, they have discussions about current topics, or there are activities that they do. It's team building, it's community building, and it's designed to make sure that every student has at least one adult that they see daily, that they are connected to, and a smaller group of peers that they're also connected to. So we all use Sown to Grow once a week in advisory. It is a computer program that allows us to take data. So the students answer a question, as you can see on the screen and on your slides. They rate their mood in that moment on this little emoji scale. And then they answer a question. The questions range from something very simple. This was one of the ones from when we first came back around how was your summer break? What do you want us to know about it? To more complex, thinking about what are your strengths? What's something you want to work on this year? And sometimes there are scenarios, what would you do if? The advisors then respond in writing, and the next time the students sign in, they see that response. And so it gives, it allows us to really kind of get a sense of how the school is doing, but it also lets those students who are not comfortable speaking up, even in a small group, it gives them the chance to connect and to share their opinions and thoughts. And I can say I have an advisory and I loop with them. So I had them last year, I had them this year, I will have them again next year. I have a student in my advisory last year who spoke maybe twice, but her Sown to Grow responses were paragraphs. She had a lot to say. She just wasn't comfortable saying it with her peers. So I think it's been really valuable in that sense. So what we can do is we can see sort of a snapshot. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we look at it. These are the 4 middle schools. The ratings correspond to the emojis that you saw. So this is the last 30 days. All of our schools are in the good range, which is great. It's sort of the average emotion once students have checked in. It's really helpful to have it just kind of get the overall feel of what's happening. If we look at it this way, we can look at the average emotion levels by week. And so you can see kind of the way normative development goes. There are some weeks that are great. I know Day had a really good day, I think in February. I'm not sure what that spike is. And Brown had one too. I want to know what they were doing because we didn't really have one of those at Bigelow. But you can see that it's a little bit up and down. And because we're lucky, because our students are kind of in the good range, it's not a huge range that you can see, but you can see that normative development is not a straight line. It's not always happy. It's not always sad. It really just does go up and down. So it's a nice way to be able to mark that. The other thing that Sown to Grow does for us is it automatically will flag any of the written responses that contain references to depression, self-harm, anxiety, the other things that are up here. I've given you 2 examples of reflections that have come back.
One of them was I'm dead inside. One of them was nothing. I'm not proud of anything this school year, to be honest. The question that week was, what's something you're proud of? What happens is teachers can also manually flag. So if something doesn't get flagged in the system and teachers are concerned, they can flag it as well. And we can see students who have continuously put in a sad emoji multiple weeks in a row. So it gives us a chance to be able to take that information and check in with those students. So our first line is always the advisor because they're the ones working with the students, but the counselors see it, the psychologist sees it, and leadership or administration can also see them. So it gives us another way to kind of get a pulse of where kids are and what's happening. I actually followed up with both of these kids. They're both okay. The I'm dead inside referenced something else. So, but those monthly alerts really do tell us that while the overall feeling of the school is positive, we do still have kids that are struggling. And so this is one way that we can kind of catch those kids. We have lots of different things that we do at the middle school level to try to catch kids. Signs of suicide is one. This is another that is a little bit more expansive and that we can use on a weekly basis. So it's been really helpful. So following up with that, what we're seeing now in the spring, we're still seeing a lot of school and class avoidance. That hasn't gone away. We continue to see students transitioning to or from hospitals or day programs. There are a long wait lists in the community. We all know that. And so students get a little bit stuck that they need that placement, but that placement isn't open. And so we're having to help maintain them, help keep them safe while they're waiting for that. We have also noticed what I'll call kind of like overall student skill deficits in that there's still that really low frustration, discomfort tolerance. I had a meeting today where I was talking with the parent about this, that I think because of everything that's gone on, kids are a little bit less used to waiting and they're a little bit less used to being uncomfortable. They've sort of been able to solve things very quickly. So having to wait or having to work through the discomfort is hard, and it's hard for anyone, but it's really hard right now for kids. And that then goes into executive function skills. It can sometimes lead to self-harming behaviors. It's sort of those big alerts that we see. That would be that kind of thing. We are also seeing, I had the opportunity to talk with the middle school psychologists and the other mental health people at the middle schools. We are seeing this really interesting thing of students self-diagnosing because they're watching a video on TikTok and they're going, oh, that's me, which is positive because it means that more students are coming to us and saying, hey, I think I have something going on. I really need that help. But when we really look at it, most of those students usually don't meet a clinical criteria for a mental illness or a disability, but they really would benefit from some information and some skills around how do you manage normative development? How do you manage if you're feeling really anxious about this test and you're not sure what to do? What do you do with that anxiety? And so those tier 1 and tier 2 supports that were so lovingly referenced in the gardening metaphor, and I don't garden at all, so I'm not using that. You don't want me near your plants. That's what we need because when those kids come to my office and they say, I saw this video, I think this is what's happening for me. It means I can say to them, you know what, we have a whole class lesson next week in advisory on this very thing that will teach you some skills to recognize when you really should be really worried about something that's happening or when you can say, actually, this is probably just part of being in middle school. So it's really important to have that. And we don't really have the space right now for that. What we are doing, again, just kind of an overview. I talked about advisory. I talked about Zone to Grow. We have been able at Bigelow because we have a very small SEL interventionist position this year. We've been able to take the information that we are getting in Zone to Grow and make some short-term groups based on that to work with students and do some short-term SEL work. They're very small groups. It's like an N of 6 or 7 right now, but we have a second round of groups going. It's across grade levels. And when we've done the pre and post surveys from it, we've seen improvement in the areas that we were focusing on in those groups. So that's been really great. We're consulting the teachers, we're supporting the things that we can. And of course, we have always the tier 3 interventions, the individual group counseling, the IEP counseling, all of those pieces. When we think about what's happening and why this is happening, obviously the pandemic impact is continuing. Again, that idea that there's so much more information now about mental health that's out for kids on TikTok, in books, on the internet, in conversation, which is great. It's taking away the stigma. It's making it much more accessible to get help. But also, kids are learning about this not in a way where they have supports around them or with guidance. So if a kid comes to me and talks about it, I have incredible resources to talk about this. So does Jesse. So do all of my colleagues. But if they're just watching on TikTok and having a conversation on Snapchat about it with their friends, they're missing pieces of it. And so we really need to be able to say to them, this is important, this is normative, this isn't as normative. We don't have as many transition or step down programs, both in the community, but at school, where we could be doing more of this work, but also helping those students who are moving from those higher tiers, lower or lower to higher. And I've been in Newton a long time, and we've used a lot of different things, and they're all really well-intentioned and really robust. We have trouble sustaining them and aligning them and being consistent, as we talked about in the last presentation. So we've used responsive classroom, we've used positive behavior intervention systems, we've used student intervention teams, roundtable teams, intervention teams, all of those things, and they're not consistent and robust enough to really put in what we need. So because we don't have these consistent aligned interventions, things often lead to special education or this inconsistent support, which then sometimes leads back to special education. And that's the person who does all of the special education evaluations. That's a lot. That is a lot in each time.
If I can just add real quick
Please
before
do.
you go back to, so the third bullet there mentions Bright program model. That's an example. Bright is I'm assuming trademark, or it's a program out of the Brookline Mental Health Center. But the idea, it's known really, in a lot of the towns and cities in the state, it's known as a Bright program. But what it is it's a short-term intensive transitional program for students who are either stepping down from a hospitalization or are awaiting a bed in a hospitalization. It's known as a Bright type program, but it can be any type, but we are lacking in that kind of support, both at our middle school levels and our high school levels, which I've talked about before, but given that this is our opportunity to hear from folks who are on the ground. And I should mention that Jordana runs our monthly, she and our elementary psychologist, Tony Kelly, run our psychologist meetings. So there's a lot of feedback there about what they're seeing. So what you're hearing tonight is a representation from not just Jordana, but from what other folks are seeing too. And this leads to some of the school avoidance that you're talking about too.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about what we need, and again, I have talked with the psychologist, I also meet with the middle school mental health group. So the counselors, the psychologists at the middle school level, we really do need some universally consistent, clear, and systemically supported tier 1 and tier 2 interventions. Exactly what is being rolled out at the elementary level. We need to really be thinking about how we can do that across all 4 middle schools so that it is consistent, so that it is aligned, and so that we are offering the amount of support that kids need. We don't want to give too much, we don't want to give too little, but we do want to make sure that it is in a Goldilocks way, just right for those kids. So we need more tier 1 and tier groups focused on executive function, social skills, all of the things that you see here, definitely building resiliency. And I really do think helping kids understand what is normative development, what does it look like? What do we need to kind of get kids through it? We all know middle school especially is a tough time developmentally. I'm sure most of us wouldn't want to be back there. I love it because I'm there all the time, but it's a trip. It is a journey. And so having that support there is really, really key. We also need to make sure that we have really clear entry and exit criteria for what you need to be in the group, what you've learned once you've been there, and when you're ready to exit, so that it doesn't just become sort of a revolving door of the same kids over and over, so that we can say, oh, this definitely needs to go to a higher level, or this can come back down. As Casey was saying, we definitely need more capacity to help kids transitioning from and to therapeutic programs. Do you want to talk about the mental health support group, the NTA piece?
Oh, sure. So out of the most recent agreement with the NTA comes a proposal for a working group, or not just a proposal, but a signed agreement that we would be working both with the NTNS and a working group to evaluate what more do we need by way of mental health supports in our district. So that's there too. It'll allow us to reevaluate what we need.
And then finally, thinking about what else we need is thinking about having an alternative therapeutic middle school program that is not the Bright type program, because that's a short-term intensive program, but to have more of the alternative sort of longer term middle school program for those kids that we find really do need that higher level of care. We're great at keeping kids in district in Newton, but middle school doesn't have that space. We have central, we have a number of other mechanisms, but given the amount of kids we have who really are struggling at that middle school level, if we had a school for them to be in, it's possible that we could then move them into the high schools and they wouldn't necessarily end up in central. They could end up just at high school. So kind of catching it early, being more preventative.
When we look at our current out-of-district numbers in our data, about 40% of our students' main diagnosis or primary diagnosis is emotionally based. And when we look at when they go out of district, it's usually around middle school.
So those are our needs. Ready?
You.
Last questions now. What would you prefer, Chair?
Would folks want to go through questions at the middle school level and then separately for elementary?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, great. So let's do that. Can you just repeat what you last said? I want to make sure that I heard that correctly. 40% of
About 40% of our students who are currently out of district have the primary diagnosis or disability of an emotional impairment. And most of those went out of district when they were in middle school.
Right, perfect. I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So questions from members? Amy, I'm suspecting you have one.
Surprise.
You
You talked about the Zone to Grow alerts, and the sort of first step is to seek out the advisory teacher, the counselor. At what point are families looped into the concerns?
So usually the counselor, I can speak for Bigelow. I think each school does it slightly differently. So at Bigelow, the counselor will follow up, the advisor will follow up, the counselor will follow up, and then the counselor usually loops the families in if it was something that was alert worthy. So often we'll get kids who will say, I feel terrible, and they sort of list all the reasons why, and the counselor will check in, and it's, they've had an argument with a friend, and it's very normative. So for those sorts of things, we wouldn't necessarily loop families in. If it's continuous and we see that it's happening every week, we absolutely reach out to families. And of course, if it's something safety related, that would be an immediate response.
So I have a question sort of about the relationship between Zone to Grow and skills-based intervention. So when I look at the needs that you've identified, they're really skills-based, right? When I think about SEL, I think more about skills than about mental health challenges. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how you use Zone to Grow to identify lagging skills that require intervention, as opposed to students who are having a struggle that's either normative or acute.
So we can use it a couple of different ways. There's a pre and post survey that we give at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and it breaks it down. I apologize, I'm not going to remember the exact categories, but it breaks it down into sense of belonging, into sort of other pieces that actually line up with the CASEL pieces. And so what we did for our group that we have at Bigelow is we took the students who had scored the lowest on the sense of belonging, and we put them in an RTI group that then talks about sort of knowing yourself, knowing the people around you, how do you connect, so sort of learning those relationship skills, so sort of soft skills. We also, within the questions that we ask, some of them are very like, so how do you get your homework done? How do you plan your day? And so we can sort of look at those responses and know, along with teacher input from the team teachers, these kids are really struggling. And so when we did our second round of groups, we asked exactly that. We asked the teams to say, what kids are you finding that are struggling? What are they struggling with? And we looked back at their Zone to Grow responses, and we put the groups together based on that information.
And I have questions that I think are reflective of questions we've been getting from the community. And I didn't know if they would come up, which is why I didn't share them in advance. So the first question is around feedback from families who worry that they've read Bad Therapy by Abby Schreier. They're worried that asking students every week how they're doing will create rumination and self-diagnosis. And so I'm wondering, how do you answer to that? Why is it good for us to keep asking kids to self-assess and then intervening accordingly?
So I think there's a difference between sort of checking in, how are you feeling right in this moment once a week, and sort of asking students to continually assess all the time. So whenever you meet somebody for the first time, what's the first thing you say? Oh, how are you doing? Right? That's the equivalent of what we're saying. Like, how are you doing? And we're working hard not to pathologize it. Right. So when I respond and I see a kid has a sad emoji, I'll just be like, oh, looks like things aren't going so well. Is anything going on? Or is it just one of those days? Right. And occasionally I've actually just asked, I sometimes do them while we're kind of all in advisory. I'll pull a kid aside and just be like, hey, I saw this, what's happening? And most of the time, I think the last time I asked, it was like, wow, I lost at this video game. I'm just so really frustrated. Okay, that's fine. So I think that continually assessing is not great. I think asking once a week is not sort of outside a boundary. And I think that it does help us be able to say to kids, some days are really not great, and that's okay.
So it sounds to me like it's much more about a sort of touch point and a connection than about a diagnosis tool, and that the interventions are really based on student self-assessment of skills and also adult assessment of skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's really helpful.
To be super clear, we're not diagnosing anything ever. Yeah.
My other question is actually about the anti-ableist work that's been happening in the district, and specifically around the role that PBIS might play in SEL instruction. And so I don't think that that's a big question, but as people continue to articulate concerns that the way that we teach students how to function socially in a healthy way is only one kind of way, I'll be curious to sort of hear how that work evolves as we think about how we can do better.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you. Great to hear again about how we're following up and tracking things. Just as an aside, my employer on our intranet does the exact same thing with the emojis. How are you doing today? And so one of my questions is regarding that, because I refuse to answer. And
That's fair. That's totally fair. I wouldn't answer either.
So is this I have no desire to have my employer know how I'm doing. But is this optional for our students? Like, do they generally respond? Are there some who, especially in middle school, refuse to?
No, everyone in middle school does everything you ask them every single time. We definitely have students who don't want to respond. And when that happens, usually the advisor will check in with them. And if it's something like, look, I don't want to do this. Okay, so just talk to me. How are you doing today? We sort of follow up that way. I certainly have a student in my advisory who is hit or miss about responding. Some weeks they do, some weeks they don't. But because they're in advisory with me, I can see them and I can kind of see what's happening. So it's good to have this data, but yes, there's always a handful of students who don't want to do it. And so we talk them through it, and we obviously can't make them, and we don't try to.
Great, thank you. So that was one thing. The other is the dashboards you showed us that showed kind of the average response is certainly good. It's a bit of a blunt instrument. Do you see anything when you look at the distribution? Like, are we seeing, is it kind of a regular bell curve? Are you seeing something bimodal? So we have a bunch of very happy students and a bunch of, not so happy students. Are there any insights or anything that the platform can give you that's helpful in that way?
Yeah, there are like 5 other graphs that I didn't show because we don't have that much time and they didn't translate well to the screen. I do actually think more students in this very blunt instrument, as you pointed out, are doing from the sort of okay to great range than from the okay to terrible range. We do have students who are consistently sort of on the lower end. But I do think for the most part, when they're checking in once a week in that one moment, most are doing okay, which is positive.
Which is good.
The ones who are not are really not. And so I think those are the ones that we want to make sure we don't miss in sort of the giant piece.
Thank you. And then final question, and Casey, this has come up, I know in other contexts, but the equivalent of a Bright program. I thought we had one, I think before you came to Newton. And then we got rid of it, and now it seems like we need it again. I don't know what the history is, but it certainly seems like it's something that needs to be back in place.
Yeah, so I think there's some confusion between a short-term intensive transition program, which is the Bright type program. And I think what you're thinking of is Harbor High, which maybe in previous years before I came, it was used for that purpose. But for the few years before I came to Newton, it was more of a 45-day assessment period for students for whom we didn't know what they needed, but we knew it was something more and different. And so this process allowed us to assess them. Which is very different from being a transitional spot for kids who are either coming out of a hospitalization or awaiting a hospitalization. 2 very different approaches and serving potentially different populations. But to my knowledge, we've never had a Bright type program in any level at secondary. I'm looking at Emily because she has the history on this. And I happen to know that there used to be a mental health center in the city, I believe, that is now Riverside. but I don't remember the name of it.
It was, it was founded by Representative Balzer, a number of years, and then it became the Riverside Center.
Which then expanded outside of it.
Right, which is, and is now part of a much broader network.
So when we think about a program like Bright, is it a separate kind of structure, or is it within a middle school in terms of how it works?
So you can contract out with a mental health center and they will supply you with the staff that you need and the structure and the training, or you can hire your own and run it on your own.
Got it.
I don't
But
know if that answers your question.
but the students at that point would continue taking middle school classes, and so there would be students receiving support within NPS.
That's right. It's a smaller space that has a clinician, ideally some academic teachers, so that they can allow for a smaller space for the student to do what they need to do academically while still getting support socially, emotionally. And then there's frequent checkpoints to see when the student can sort of integrate back into the larger school environment. And then you have students who are just stepping down, let's say, from an intensive care unit and going back to a middle school and just sort of being expected to.
That would be overwhelming.
Way overwhelming. And so this would provide a sort of a stepping stone before they go back. And again, frequent checkpoints.
No, thank you. That's helpful. I feel like this is a topic for a bigger discussion.
Yeah. And I think what you'll see tonight, the theme is that while the numbers might not be increasing, the needs are becoming way more complex. Even as we look at both the kids who are already out of the district and those that are in that, I don't remember what the qualifiers are, but the red to orange part of the part, the numbers might be small, but the profiles, the needs are high. And they're not as clear cut, I think, as we may have seen 5, 7, 10 years ago.
Okay.
And the chronic absenteeism still exists.
That's helpful. So it definitely sounds like something we'd want to follow up on. Thank you.
Just on that point, I had a couple questions on that same thing. So if I can jump in for you, what would be like the numbers of students we'd be talking about that would be candidates for a Bright style program? Like how large of a population are we talking?
You know, I don't know. I haven't looked at it. I mean, I don't know if Bigelow, if you could give like if you think maybe even in one grade.
I think at any given moment, I'm trying to do the numbers, like I'm naming students in my head. I think we currently at Bigelow, if we had a program like that, we could easily right now make about 4 referrals to it.
Okay.
And Bigelow's our smallest school.
Yep.
So I imagine you could extrapolate.
It's probably couple dozen students at any one time.
Definitely more at the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And just to make sure I have a full understanding of it, and we're talking about this, this conversation in the context of mental health, but a Bright program would serve students outside of a mental health capacity for, entering a hospital stay or something like that. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question?
So a Bright program is not just mental health related. Like you could have a kid who's had
Concussion.
had some serious illness and was hospitalized for weeks and enter back into transition back into a school through a Bright style program. It's not just a mental health specific.
Yeah,
okay.
Correct. The only thing that I would caution is for disciplinary purposes. That's an entire different thing. So a student bringing a weapon to school, that is not what this is.
Yep. Totally. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Emily, Tamika, you had a question then after?
I'm thinking about what your answer was, and I think that most of the Bright programs are hospitalizations that are related to mental health issues. I just want to make that clear.
The need is so
But the need is
most of
huge,
it-
right?
yes.
But
it's not exclusive.
No. All right. So thank you so much for this. Such important information for us to have. I have 2 questions for you. One has to do with middle school central, because I'm totally intrigued. My youngest checked every box that you just described in your presentation, all of them, and would definitely have benefited from a central type environment in middle school, and in fact went to Harbor Middle School at the, I don't know if it's still there, but it's at yep, in one of the modulars, the Ed Center. And so my question is, I guess, I don't know if it was the same question that Chris asked and I just missed it, but what is the need and what is the immediate need? I'm concerned about kiddos that we have right now who could definitely benefit from a program like that. You know, what is the budget implications associated with it? Is it anything that we can implement anytime soon?
Yeah, so I can answer, I think, most, if not all of these questions. I think if I had to pick two, the urgent need is the Bright type program, right? Central Middle School is just a name we just sort of put because we all know what Central High School is. And that's, I mean, I'm dreaming big here, and this is my chance to do it. We are dreaming big. My hope is that we are reducing the number of kids who are going out of district. So right now they are being served out of district, right? Which is different. It's just a whole different ballgame, but not all. But my hope is that as we identify students, maybe 4th, 5th grade who need it, there's a spot for them. And so we're not automatically looking at the Manvilles, you know, I could name so many others, but the different types of schools that we send a lot of our students to with that profile. So and it would be, sorry, just one thing, a public day school in the way that Central High would be.
Right.
And so if we were to grow it, and it is fantastic in the way that all of our programs are, we could take in other, we can tuition in students from other,
just like Central High. Yeah.
There's not a lot of those type of schools and districts.
The real big difference to me about a Bright or a Bridge program is that it's a tier 3 intervention that does not require an IEP. And those kinds of programs will always make space for students who are awaiting a bed or returning to a bed. Like that's sort of who you're serving. And so you can get a 4-week visit, but it's really all about stabilization. So when you talk about cost, for a Bridge program to be really effective, it needs to be a part of each middle school, right? Like the pie in the sky is that every middle school has one, whereas a central space fee can take from all. A real true Bright program is about stabilizing so that you're on the bridge to returning back to your home school. There are models though, where the Bridge program is also the Central Middle School program. And you've always got like some beds for hospitalization or spaces for hospitalization returns and a couple of other spots for kids who just seem to need something else. And so I'd be curious to look into those, into marrying the two. Yeah. It's messier.
More about
interesting concept.
Yeah, it is, but also not to be confused, because I think maybe in Westwood it's called the Bridge program, but not to be confused with our citywide program called Bridge.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just don't want to.
It's actually not even in Westwood. It's just Wellesley is Bridge and Brookline is Bright, and those are two ways to
okay.
about this program.
Okay. Yeah.
So my second question is really more of a wondering than anything, which is, it sounds like you're getting some very interesting information and data from the Sow to Grown, I never say it right, program. And I'm wondering if there's any value or benefit to sort of cross-referencing some of that with the YRBS data that we get, because I would be very interested to know, because it's sort of both self-reported, and it would be interesting to see, you know, if there's anything that's a complete outlier, or like if it matches in some ways what you're seeing. So that's just a thought.
I should note also that, so Bigelow brought Sown to Grow to Newton, and they started it 2 years ago. And then we got a grant this year for the rest of the middle schools to do it. So we have a grant for 1 more year. And so we will look and see how we go about.
I'll add that we did look at sort of our sense of belonging, and then also looked at that on the YRBS to kind of see if, and they did align. So it was interesting.
Just curious.
Yeah, I would be interesting to look more.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily. Tamika?
Thank you. So I was very patient through a lot of discussion, and Casey, you actually hit on the question that I wanted to ask, which was to follow up on Jordana's comment about Sown to Grow and how expensive it is as a program. So my understanding is we have this, from what you just said, Bigelow piloted the program a year or 2
This is our
ago?
second year.
Yeah. Second 2 years. Yep. And so we have the pilot covering this year, but those funds will
So we have
lapse next year?
We have Title
Yeah.
IV funding for one more school year. So the 24-25 school year we have funding for.
And it's
After that.
And is part of the thinking then to assess in next year, whether that's something you would like to recommend that we continue, and that's part of the work of next year's teams. Okay.
Yeah, well before budget season.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamika. Barry and then Paul.
So Sown to Grow is only at Bigelow right now?
It's at all 4 middle schools. So is that only Bigelow last school year? This
Yep.
school year, all 4 middle schools are using it.
I'm curious if you all noticed any difference in the data for the middle school that is locking their cell phones.
That's interesting. We've started talking about it, but I haven't seen their data, so I don't know. But that is one of the questions that we have to see if that has made it.
Well, I mean, if you
Yeah.
can share that back with us, I'd be
Absolutely.
very curious.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barry. Paul?
A few questions. Do you look at the data across the advisories to see if there's any connection between the Sown to Grow results and to provide feedback to teachers about approaches they might be taking in the classroom that would be contributing to problems that are showing up?
So that's not my role at the schools since I'm the psychologist. So that would be more of a principal or vice principal role. I know that we have, as a staff, have talked about some of the Sown to Grow data and talked about how we use it in advisory because that's where we have it. And I know that some of the staff have used kind of the feedback they've seen in Sown to Grow to drive some of their advisory activities. So we have used it in that way.
I guess.
So I do believe that I have included for you 2 presentations from principals under goal 2 in your artifacts for the district goals of how it's been used. For example, at Bigelow, Principal Costin actually pulled out the relevant data and asked grade level teams to meet to deal with whatever the individual data was. Am I accurately representing that? So let me just double check, but I'm pretty sure I gave you 2 examples of that from Brown and Bigelow.
Great. I need a translation for 2 terms.
Sure.
What's a normative situation?
Something that you would expect to see. So something that most students go through, something. Yep.
Okay.
I was not correct. It's Bigelow, and I gave you an elementary example of following up on the panorama data. So that's on page 11 of the goals.
And when you talk about the percent of kids who are out of district for emotional impairment, what do you mean by emotional impairment?
So it's one of the state categories that we use to qualify a student for an IEP.
And are you suggesting that earlier intervention in the schools might obviate the need for some of those?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I'd like to think so. Some of the research that Maria had cited, they're thinking about teaching skills and thinking about higher frustration tolerance and other things. But obviously, as kids develop, their brains, their minds are different, and so their ability to tolerate frustration or other things to deal with big emotions may not be captured early on. So I'm not entirely sure. It's a good question. But we just know that most of our kids are going out for social, emotional, behavioral challenges around middle school. So there's something going on. And so if we can address it in district, I'd like to explore that.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
Other questions on middle school? Should we move on to elementary? Okay, great. Thank you.
You don't mind. Thank you. Hi, folks. Always nice to see you. Thanks for having us back. Go ahead, please. So briefly, when I was here last time, I spoke about our panorama surveys that we've been thrilled to roll out this year. We are currently the survey window for our student survey, which is a student self-assessment of their own social emotional learning skills, as well as their relationships and connectedness, is currently open. It closes next Wednesday, so we'll have some data to share out then. We trialed the teacher perception of student survey this year, really in pockets, such small pockets that the data is not terribly conclusive, but it's a nice exercise, I think, for teachers to reflect on the needs of their students and their own biases. And we're also looking forward to next winter pushing out the family surveys to families as an engagement strategy, and also really trying to dig into understanding some perceptions, various perceptions on various themes from our families and caregivers. I'm really excited about this. So we received funds from the Newton School Foundation, as well as the Department of Education, that has allowed us to create universal take-a-break spaces in every single classroom in all 15 of our elementary schools, including our specialists. So what that means, so a take-a-break space is a space that a young person learns how to use to reorganize themselves, to re-engage with learning. And at these take-a-break spaces, there are timers, various tools, again, to aid self-regulation and focus. And we will have consistent take-a-break spaces in all of those classrooms across the city, which is a first. Also within our elementary schools, we typically have an SEL room or a mental health room or a combination of the two. And in those spaces, we will also have consistent access to take-a-break resources for tier 2, tier 3 needs. And lastly, these funds also allowed us to purchase flexible seating options for those designated 5 high-need schools that Maria and Aisha previously spoke about. We also received some funding through the Department of Education, specifically looking at reducing the use of timeout rooms. We received $200,000 that we are going to be using to train staff in safety care. Safety care is the training module that we use in the district to teach educators how to de-escalate students and as well as physically manage. The plan is not to, you see here, the goal is to train about 320 educators in the de-escalation, not in physical management. The strategy here being, and quite frankly, this is something that classroom teachers have been asking for some time. People like us, I think, see a lot of behavioral episodes that begin in a classroom and can be de-escalated if educators have the training, which is something that most of our folks haven't received. So I see this as something that's very important and very proactive in nature. And we're also going to be focusing the safety care trainings, the full training, both the de-escalation and the physical management piece at our schools that have special education programming. We also, it was a year of grant funding, which was exciting for social emotional learning in this district, because it's not something we've had previously. We can also, for the first time since I've been here, this is my 14th year now, we're going to have consistent social emotional learning intervention curricula to be used for tier 2, tier 3 interventions across the district. Across the schools, forgive me, elementary schools. So we have Little Spot of Feelings, which is a nice feeling identification curriculum for our younger ones. Centervention is an online SEL skill-based intervention tool. The AIM curriculum is based on acceptance and commitment therapy, probably going to be used for our older ones, older elementary. And Mind Up is a curriculum that teaches students about the brain. It's rooted in mindfulness. Teaches self-regulation strategies, focuses on community building. These are all curricula for the most part that our SEL and mental health teams have been using. We haven't necessarily had them consistently in all of our buildings. So it's something that's speaking to the MTSS work that's being done. It's exciting to be able to say that we have consistent intervention materials across the district.
I just want you to know that I shadowed the SEL interventionist at Lincoln Elliott.
Oh, yes.
Last week.
Yes.
And I saw,
it's wonderful.
I saw centervention work happen right there.
Yeah.
Like in the moment.
Yeah.
So.
Very cool. Cool. Thank you.
Educational.
Yes. Thinking about summer work. So as you know, EL is our literacy curriculum that our friends in the literacy department have been rolling out this year. Within EL education, the EL curriculum is rooted itself within what they call their character framework, which is really an SEL framework, similar to most other SEL frameworks, and similar to the Castle framework with which we've based our work. And the character framework being, again, skills like compassion, empathy, collaboration, communication. So this really is our tier 1 social emotional learning curriculum right now. We're excited because as social emotional learning should be, it's something that's integrated throughout content. And so our work really here over the summer and quite frankly in the coming school year, but this is primarily in the summer, is thinking about aligning our first 6 weeks guidance to that character framework. So how do we build community? How do we build structure? How do we build routine that's rooted within this EL framework? We're also going to be creating supplemental lessons to supplement that character work. And we're going to continue the work in partnership with DEI, thinking about gender and race discussion guides. Thank you. Very briefly, our elementary support and stabilization update. So just to familiarize you folks a little bit, interesting hearing about stabilization at secondary because it looks quite different for a variety of reasons at the elementary level. For those of you who are new to the committee, as a reminder, the stabilization team is comprised of myself, special educator, social worker, BCBA, and 3 behavior therapists. And what we do is support students who are experiencing significant social, emotional, and behavioral distress in their schools. Rather than pulling them out, we push in to support these students and coach and model and problem solve with teams there. Through the years, we have seen referrals to this highest level of mental health intervention at the elementary level consistently increase. This year, we've received 39 referrals across all 15 elementary schools. It's remarkable that the folks on this team are able to do the unbelievable work that they do, given the amount of referrals they've received, given the amount of acuity that we are seeing that Jordana spoke to at the secondary level, and the chronic nature of these needs. So in years past, I've been doing the stabilization work, again, for nearly 14 years. In years past, we would push in, we would support students, families, teams, students would stabilize, and we would pull out. And one of the differences we're seeing now is a need to provide ongoing consultation because of the chronic nature of the support of the need, that these students are experiencing. You can always clarify.
No. So Jesse oversees what is essentially a mobile traveling stabilization program across all 15 schools. Not a lot of places have this.
It's
something we should be proud of because it allows students to stay in their community while working on the skills that they need to work on and getting the supports that they need. And then it's a teach the teacher model or train the trainer model where they are, Jesse and his small and mighty team are training the teachers themselves and whoever else is involved with the student at that school. And then they gradually pull back.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. That's what we do. It's exciting work. And not only do we stabilize students, but quite frankly, more importantly, we're including them meaningfully. It's not just that we're stabilizing, we're helping them really reach the sort of outcomes that we would want for all of our students. The problem is that we're spread thin. 39 referrals in a school year for the students that we work with is a lot, given the FTEs that are listed up there. So it's something that I'm conscious of. Next, please. This is something, forgive the terribly small, I can't read that. But the disproportionality of this data is something that is a bell that I always want to ring when I have the chance to. These are our stabilization referrals. You'll see that 30% of our referrals are of students who identify as Black. I believe we're just over 4% in the district of students who identify as Black. And then students who are in our MECO program also is just above 4% at the elementary level. And you'll see that nearly 25% of our referrals for stabilizations are students who live in Boston. So again, this is something that I think warrants attention. I'm grateful again for my friends in the back here who are doing such important works with regards to tiered intervention. One of the things I was thinking about when they were talking about MTSS is the important work towards equity. So not only does the MTSS work that our friends in the back are leading, not only does it slow down referrals for special education because students are receiving what they need, but it slows down referrals for high intervention services like this that have such a problem with disproportionality. This can be very brief. The hiring for social workers is done, which is really, really exciting. I just submitted my last hiring rec today. One thing I can say is I've been hiring social workers in this district for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 6 years or so. And we've just had wonderful candidates. I'm really excited about the folks that are coming to join us. So.
Folks with experience.
Yeah. For years, the applicants that I've been seeing, wonderful folks, but like, green, and we've hired folks who are green, and they're brilliant. But these folks really come to us with a lot of experience. It's really exciting. And then just quite frankly, the trends are I don't need to be redundant. The trends are the same, whether it's elementary or secondary. Those lagging skills, the feelings of disconnectedness, the anxiety, the depression, the decrease in access or the difficulty regarding access of community-based resources. To me, this, and I said this, I think the last time I was here, but I'll say it again, we live in stressful times. Adults are stressed, families are stressed, and kids are stressed, and it's what we're seeing and what we continue to see. Last thing I want to point out, just thinking about needs, aside from the stabilization team being stretched too thin, right now it is the RSEL interventionists at the elementary level, which was referenced earlier, which we're so thrilled to have at all 15 of our elementary schools. Just to remind you that primarily are providing tier 2 SEL intervention to general education students. One of the things that happens with these folks is they're oftentimes the first person pulled in a crisis. They could be the first person pulled to provide intensive support to an individual student. And so that intervention goes away. We were aware of that when we designed this. It was better than not having SEL interventionists, but it's a problem. It's something I want to raise with you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members? Barry?
First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
That was very helpful. I'm curious how long the stabilization program has been going on.
Oh, yeah. So I came in 2010 and it had been around. So when I came in 2010, we were housed at Franklin, and it was much more akin to a 45-day placement. And what the reality of what happened, and actually it started in this building, I think in one of the modulars, actually. And then it was moved to Franklin when I first started. And a few things happened. One is the majority of the students that were coming were Black and brown boys, which was terribly problematic in our view. And when students came, we were oftentimes able to stabilize. And then when we would transition back to the school, things would fall apart. And so we decided, I think in 2000, gosh, I don't even remember, 2014, maybe. I'm looking at Maria. 2014, maybe we decided, hey, let's push into schools and see what happens. With an eye, again, working with students to stabilize, and really, as Casey was saying, coaching and modeling for staff, and intensive work with families in school. So how long has it been around? Maybe, I don't actually know, 15 years maybe?
So, and in its current form,
In its current form, I would say it's probably been 8-9 years or so. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm curious if there's opportunity maybe to use one of those rating type programs in conjunction with it, and then maybe comparing data with the rating program that you're doing in middle school, but as the kids are traveling, just to see maybe potential impact.
But do you mean as the students we work with go through the school system? Yeah, it's something that I've been really curious. We've talked about sort of what's the outcome data for.
Yeah,
Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
So the outcome data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That's something I can't speak to.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Paul?
Could you explain to me what instability looks like? What
I can explain it. Yeah, instability. It could. Yeah, for sure. It can look many different ways. It can look like very quiet and disengaged, and it can look like running out of the building and being physically assaulted. So it's hard. It's, when we're working with students who, again, have been deemed unstable, these are students who oftentimes it has to do with safety, but certainly not always. It can look different at elementary than it can in secondary, where young people are much more likely to be explosive, but not always.
And how much, if you can answer this,
I could try.
How much is related to a lack of social and emotional skills on their part versus some underlying medical condition or some home-based situation or some classroom-based situation?
It's often all of those things, quite frankly. Is it a lack of social and emotional skills? Absolutely. Is it always because of some pathology? Not necessarily. We, particularly with young people, as you know, when they're experiencing stress, they can look very out of control. Yeah. And so that's not always because of what some might call mental illness. It could be environmental in nature, for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rajiv? Mika?
Thank you. For the students you push into classrooms for and provide stabilization, does that generally lead to a referral in terms of an evaluation and support, questioning, whether there's a need for an IEP or some more, I'd say, sustained support as opposed to the on-demand push-in?
Great question. So we work with a mix of general education and special education students. For the special education students, for the general education students that we work with, oftentimes there'll be an evaluation will be in process or will have been proposed. And if not, it probably will be.
Thank you very much for wonderful information. And I'm glad, Casey, that you bragged about that a little bit, that this program, it's remarkable. And so, yeah, we should be.
And I just want to say, it is remarkable. The people who do this work on the day-to-day, I'm the guy at the Ed Center these days. I used to be in the classrooms doing this, but they are remarkable educators. Truly incredible.
Absolutely. So I had a question about the take a break spaces.
Yes, please.
You described it, but I can't see it.
Yeah.
So see it.
Right. So, this is a practice that it's one of the core features of responsive classroom. It's been in the district for a long time. It's not something new to educators, and they are alive to varying degrees across the district. In some classrooms, it's a space that nobody uses. And in some classrooms, it's a space that's being used quite robustly. So what they are typically is, it could be nothing more than a chair and a desk with some tools. And again, it's something that students are explicitly taught. And so when you feel like you need to organize yourself, when you feel like you need to take a self-regulation break, when you feel like you need a break from the community in the classroom, students are taught to go to this place. There's age appropriate directions. You can set a timer for yourself, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You can engage in some cognitive distraction. You can do some deep breathing. Again, it's a mechanism for explicitly teaching the sorts of self-regulation skills that, quite frankly, we all need. Most of us, as we become adults, find ways to take these breaks. We go to the bathroom, we get water, we go for a walk. Young people historically in classrooms haven't had that opportunity. And so we're going to have consistency in practice, which is really exciting.
Great. And we have secured that grant for how many years? 2 years?
So we were that this is just for this year. I just made a ton of purchases that will be getting delivered to this building pretty soon. We're not sure where the boxes are going, but that was it was one-time funds.
Okay, so in theory, that's not something that has to replenish every year,
you know,
but maybe periodically as needed.
They will. So we really tried to buy items that, like, no offense to the dollar store, but were sort of dollar store things that were going to be trashed. So things that we hope would last. But yeah, I mean, these aren't going to last for years and years.
Cool. And my last point is just, I guess, 8 years ago when the program in this current form of pushing into schools was conceived, you were noticing that there was disproportionality among the students being referred. And it seems as though today there still is disproportionality among the students who are served, though, in their schools. So I guess as you're looking at the trend from the 8 years ago to now, have you seen about a consistent rate, or has it varied over time? And how do we address that going forward?
Extremely consistent. And I think we address it. I hate to beat a dead horse. No offense to horses. I hate to be redundant, but it's this MTSS work that truly that is our biggest opportunity here to change this. What is both disproportionately problematic and inequitable. Amy?
I would love to see the breakdown of stabilization referrals based on IEP eligibility.
Oh yeah, I have all that stuff. I'd be happy to share that.
Sorry, what did you say you wanted?
The breakdown of stabilization referrals based on IEP eligibility or status. Could you talk a little bit more about what an SEL curriculum looks like, specifically the ones that were purchased using grant funding?
Yeah.
Like, I understand responsive classroom. This feels different.
Yeah. So these curricula are primarily for intervention. So it's skill-based intervention. And so they're not necessarily, although some of them do, it's not necessarily looking at community building and structures and systems within a classroom, but it's really targeted skill instruction. So the goal being, and using Panorama as a data point, being able to identify skills that need to be further developed and target those skills within an intervention group using, and frankly, educators are welcome to use other resources as well, but using some of these resources that we're providing.
Yeah. And so I think I have the same question for the elementary folks as I
do
for the middle school folks, which you can't really answer, I think, in 30 seconds. But
we could try.
The advocacy that we've heard this year around supporting neurodivergent students is about, there's more than one way to be.
That's right.
To function in a classroom, to function in social spaces.
Yep.
And some resources that have been shared many times to the committee are not reflected here, and I don't know anything about them. And I'm wondering, like, how do you think about when a teacher in the second grade classroom says, I have a student who just won't listen?
Yeah.
How do you work with educators to think about different ways that listening might look, and help a kid feel connected?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I can't answer that in 30 seconds. But I would ask, how do you know they're not listening?
Right.
And so this is a lot of the work. And Maria's leading this anti-ableist work, the curriculum work. This is a lot of the work that we're engaging in with our community partners right now, is thinking about how we need to change the way that we do business to move away from your point, I think, of whole body listening, which is something that we've all heard in a million elementary school classrooms. And that's just one example of sort of practices that we're trying to move away from to be more inclusive of neurodiversity.
So I just want to say that we just had a training on this very topic for all 100 of our administrators. So this is, before the anti-ableism curriculum is launched, we have to train internally about what that means in terms of mindset shifts for our staff. So that occurred on, we had 2-part session, right? 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And case studies within those full body listening was an exact practice that was sort of debunked and unpacked by our educators in that session.
That said, though, I think you're hitting on this huge mindset shift that our educators, every single one of our educators need to rethink. And so we have to be strategic in order for it to stick, right? And so we started with our administrators, so over 100 of them a couple of weeks ago at our regular meeting, but then in thinking also with the support and partnership with the Disability Advisory Group, DAG, advising me from folks with lived experiences, our leaders at CPAC, but then also we have 30 student services administrators who also meet twice a month, and thinking about first, how do we interrogate what has been and what actually is ableist and does not work? And how do we begin to dismantle that while still educating the community? Because it's such a big shift. So we're doing it in bits and pieces, but you'll see more of it next year. And I hope to have an opportunity to update the community regularly through this forum on the anti-ableism work that we're doing.
And I really appreciate you asking the question because it's something that, to Casey's point, we're paying a lot of attention to. And it's exciting and important.
And big, but it's like really big.
Yeah,
and
it's really big.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I'd say is Tamika, I really appreciated your question about overrepresentation. I'm also struck by the underrepresentation of girls in this data. And
Stabilization data. Yeah.
I, just wondering about like, compliance and,
I know you're an educator as well. Particularly at the elementary, although certainly at the secondary level, girls are just more likely to be internalizers. And it's just what it is. And it's something that's scary. Because we know that there are girls in distress at our elementary schools and we're not aware of it. And the boys are more likely to make it known. Not always. That doesn't always apply. Certainly there's girls who can express their distress in external ways. But I think that's part of the reason why.
I actually think we tend to see more girls at the secondary level, the middle school. I don't have the data to back it up, but I've been here a long time and I've been at the elementary and I've been in the middle school. And I think we tend to catch the boys more quickly at the elementary school, and then the girls hit middle school.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And we find
Yeah.
they aren't usually as loud as explosive. Some of them are, but I think that's when we see them. And I think that is a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the different, Central Middle School and Brighton, I think that's the population that we see more of.
And with Zone to Grow, you're also asking. Yes. Right. And so that student you talked about earlier, right, who doesn't say a word but might write a lot, might be that student who was pretty compliant in 5th grade.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Rajiv?
To that point around the anti-ableist work, right? To my knowledge, there isn't necessarily a consistent viewpoint in the science or among parents and families in Newton about the approach. There in fact, I think is quite a lot of divergence within both the scientific community and the parental or guardian community in Newton in terms of anti-ableism, what it means, is acknowledging it, is acknowledging a disability the right thing to do or not, and then also the extent to which people function in different ways and children function in different ways versus we need to help our children be able to function within a community, which is not a utopian paradise yet.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that as we go through this, we're not necessarily saying everything's okay, because that's not going to necessarily lead to us educating students who are able to make their way independently. So again, we haven't, Casey, I know you haven't had a chance to give us an update on the DAG or the anti-ableist work, but when you do, it would be very interesting to hear about the variety of viewpoints around it.
Sure. I think what it boils down for me is, and this is where we begin the work, is in our community, our school district community, how are we valuing, in what ways do we value ability? So we are assigning a value to smart, fast, big, better. I'm painting with broad strokes here, but how does that play out in terms of what a teacher says and does with a group of students, with a class of students? in terms of what is communicated to students with what is valued. So when we say, let's say, I know you're listening to me because you're making eye contact, but Paul can be listening to me too. But if I praise Chris and not Paul, what message am I sending to Paul? And that builds, right? These are micro moments, and we need to be able to capture what just happened here in a way that is productive and supports our teachers and gives them the tools that they need. It's a very, very small example, but we do this. There's structural ableism. There's so many different types of ableism out there that we need to be able to reach out to the community and we all learn about together. So we have to start there. And I get the points that you're saying is that there are polarizing pieces to this work, but at the very, very beginning piece is what are we valuing and why? And when we value something, we're devaluing something else or someone else. So to the point of the parent who had who made public speak earlier, disability isn't a bad word. And we shouldn't be afraid
I
to
hear
talk
what you're
about it.
saying. I don't necessarily fully agree with what you said, but yes, disability for some families, I think, might be seen as a bad word. For others, it's not. Certainly as disabled students get older, the idea of self-advocacy and support is important. And if they cannot speak about a disability, it's really hard to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think there's a lot to this. It's not the topic, but I think it's a topic worth getting into at some point.
Agreed. Self-advocacy and dignity are huge. Dignity of life and self-advocacy. And we have to figure a way to bring that out in students so that they can be their authentic selves, whether they are verbal or not. That's our job to figure out.
Real quick. In terms of giving teachers the tools that they need, I just want to underscore, Jesse, I think you mentioned a grant to fund chairs, chairs so that a student who is looking like me, active listening, can have the chair they need, or a student that needs to bounce.
Yes.
I think that's to Amy, to your point about how are we implementing anti-ableism now in the moment. I think something that small allows the learner who needs what they need to have what they need. And so I just want to commend you for making that purchase and having the discussion about ableism. And Rajiv, I hear you, and I understand that there are a range of different perspectives around this conversation. But the fact is we're having the conversation and building it into our thinking and being mindful of it for our kids. So
if I could just say one more thing, there's not a lot of school districts in the country that are having this conversation. So it's really exciting to be able to do this with you all.
Other questions? All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Up next, we have our CPAC end of year report. And just to sort of to build on what Rajiv was talking about a little bit, because we've gotten some questions from folks in the community as to why we're not having a student services update. And the committee did make a decision this year that we're sort of stepping back from having the annual update style presentations and really trying to focus on new initiatives. I think, the anti-ableist curriculum, the disability group will be, those types of new initiatives that student services will be presenting to us at a future date. So with that, we have our CPAC leaders here. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. We've had some lengthy discussions. You've been here all evening.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good evening. We are really honored to follow all of these thoughtful presentations and discussions tonight. My name is Eliza Spalding. I am the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, or CPAC Secretary, and I am joined by Member at Large, Jenny Klein-Sosa, who is here to answer questions with me. Tonight, we will review CPAC's role and responsibilities, invite questions for consideration, recognize the many volunteers who make the CPAC possible, discuss our advisory efforts over the past year, and look ahead to next year. Since we are only able to touch upon highlights, we encourage you to read our more comprehensive end-of-year report, which includes data and information that is all available publicly. We speak to you this evening from the parent and guardian perspective, and in saying this, we acknowledge that this is not the full picture. Therefore, in future meetings, we hope to hear directly from NPS leaders on the state of special education in our district from an administrative point of view. Only then can parents and families better understand how the challenges we will outline tonight will be matched by the plans that our educators have for supporting our students with disabilities going forward. The CPAC is different in several key ways from other parent groups like the PTOC or school councils or PTOs. By law, the CPAC must exist in every Massachusetts school district to advise the school committee on matters related to the education and safety of disabled students across the district, and to meet regularly with school officials to participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of special education programs. As elected board members representing the CPAC, we fulfill these legislatively mandated roles by holding regular open board meetings to gather community feedback, sharing advisory statements through verbal and written public comments, and by engaging in ongoing close partnership with district and city leaders. As we discuss our collective efforts to support students tonight, we ask you to keep these two orienting questions in mind. From your perspective, how can the school committee and CPAC be effective partners next year? And as a school committee, what do you hope is the NPS experience for students with disabilities? We were fortunate this year to have many dedicated and talented volunteers serve on the board and in other key roles. Thank you. School committee representation at our monthly open board meetings continues to be essential to supporting open dialogue. Paul, Barry, and Chris, we thank you for making this a priority. We hope that every school committee member will consider joining us at meetings for direct dialogue with our community going forward as well. We currently are in the process of composing our next board. New members will assume their roles on July 1st. Our heartfelt thanks also to our network of liaisons who represent CPAC and serve as a resource to families and school administrations across the district. In our end-of-year report, we highlight an important data trend that we want to point out here as well. From 2020 to 2024, NPS's percentage of students with disabilities went up by 0.6%. While this may not seem like much, it is important to note that this upward trend has been observed during a time when NPS's all-student population has decreased by 8%. In that time period, the percent of English language learners has also gone up by 1.2%, and the percent of students who experience economic disadvantage has also gone up by 4.8%. These powerful data clearly show rising needs of our student population since the pandemic. We encourage NPS to use this as a guide when engaging in programmatic and financial planning and decision-making. This past year, our advisory efforts focused on the following topics, some of which reflect ongoing community concerns and others which were unique to this year. We'll begin with the ongoing concerns. Providing all students with an inclusive, affirming, and accessible school experience continues, of course, to feel essential to families. The formation this year of the Disability Advisory Group, or DAG, which is composed of disabled adults with lived experiences, is an important expansion of perspectives. One area where NPS, CPAC, and DAG, and others may come together is around creating fully inclusive and accessible school building spaces, playgrounds, and field trips for all students. Families continue to express a strong desire for an updated extended school year program guide to better understand summer programming. We also heard from families of experiential changes to extended school year eligibility determinations and program and timeline recommendations. Families seek greater communication and transparency around these important conversations. Questions around NPS policies and practices related to restraint, seclusion, and extended timeouts have been brought up in the past and continue to be a concern for many in the CPAC community. A number of parents reported experiencing noncompliance with stated policy and procedures and significant variability in the manner in which restraint and seclusion practices are implemented at different schools. Families have expressed an interest in a district-wide move away from seclusion rooms and toward wellness rooms. In early May, NPS leadership was informed that they had been awarded, as we heard tonight, a federal grant for implementing strategies to reduce or eliminate the use of timeout rooms. We applaud the district for seeking and receiving this grant and ask that NPS share details about the safety care training for de-escalation and physical management that will be implemented using these funds. Over the last 2 years, the CPAC board has also engaged with NPS administration around planning for the new IEP form, which was created by DESE to serve as an improved roadmap for student-centered IEP discussions. This new form must be fully implemented statewide by fall 2024, yet many parents remain unaware that this is coming. CPAC has advocated for NPS to offer a parent-focused training, and we were pleased to hear that this will occur next month. CPAC will continue to assist the district in conveying information to families to help facilitate a common understanding of the new form. Transitioning now to issues that were unique to this year, our community felt the effects of teachers' contract negotiations and strike, as I think we all did. Before and during the 11-day strike, the CPAC board engaged in a number of efforts to encourage leadership from all involved parties to find a resolution and settle the contract as soon as possible. We compiled concerns, heard from parents of students with disabilities, and shared them with leadership. Once schools reopened, CPAC organized a Q&A with the Office of Student Services to address concerns about how the district would make up for the lost learning time and service delivery. The full effects of students' experiences of this time are yet to be determined. The CPAC is hopeful that key learnings from this difficult process will help avoid it ever happening again. In August 2023, NPS began planning to develop an anti-ableism curriculum for students designed to expand the scope of principles taught in understanding our differences and codify them with the purpose of making NPS a holistic, anti-ableist, disability-affirming school district. Current and former CPAC board members sit on this working group to bring as many voices from our community as possible into the conversation. We look forward to continuing to contribute to the development and implementation of this curriculum. As you've heard in the past and again tonight, stronger transparency and communication are at the heart of what our community asks for. Families want to feel a deep sense of trust with NPS as a school district, and we ask that in all of your actions, you center this request, which we believe ultimately serves everyone best. Looking ahead to the next academic year, we encourage the incoming CPAC board to balance listening to the community with what we imagine will be continued efforts towards many of the initiatives we just spoke about. We encourage NPS to update its statement of values to clearly affirm inclusion of students with disabilities, and we ask that leaders commit to drafting an annual special education report that tracks NPS's progress on the many dimensions of data and issues of priority that we have outlined this year. We believe that a firm commitment to anti-ableism and transparency regarding student needs and the programs and services available to them are foundational to creating a fully equitable, inclusive, and accessible school experience of belonging for all students. In closing, our profound gratitude to the NPS educators and other staff members who strive to make meaningful connections and a positive difference in the lives of students with disabilities. This year, families submitted 189 nominations to recognize 179 NPS educators and other staff members for a CPAC award. To give a sense of these nominations, we share an example here of one nomination which has been anonymized, and it reads, "My son is on an IEP for reading, and this educator works with him every single day. He has shown such incredible growth, and despite reading being hard for him, I believe he is still willing to give it his all because she makes it fun and engaging. And as a mom who is navigating reading disabilities for the first time, this educator has made herself available to me for every question I have had about strategies, summer options, and everything else I was nervous or curious about. I have felt incredibly supported in this journey, and I'm just very grateful there are teachers out there like her." And as always, our deepest thanks and appreciation to CPAC's many partners, our community, central administration staff, and especially Casey No-Miller, Melissa Gamble, and Maura Tynes, and you, the school committee. A special thank you to Anna Nolan for seeking to build authentic relationships with everyone in the community from before day one. Your efforts have been felt, and we are incredibly grateful for them. We value our partnerships with you all tremendously and know that in a district as big and complex as Newton's, that our efforts are strongest together. We are grateful now for your thoughts and questions.
Thank you for the presentation and honestly, more importantly, thank you for the, 18, 20 pages of the annual report you all put together that had a lot of great information in it. Questions from members? Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks for coming. Before I ask a question that you won't be able to answer because it's the one we struggle with all the time, but I just want to say what a pleasure and privilege it was for me being the liaison from the school committee. And I know Barry is going to enjoy it very much too. This is a spectacularly good committee, both in terms of membership, process, devotion to what their statutory role is and beyond. You've been, from my point of view, and I think my colleagues would say this also, you've been of tremendous help to us in your thoughtful discussions and recommendations. Even where we haven't been able to necessarily accept those recommendations, they have influenced our process in a very positive way. So please extend our thanks to your members on that front. Among your, and here's my unanswerable question, among your comments over the months, there've been some rather direct comments about our budgeting process. And you've pointed out the higher caseload, for example, of the special education faculty members, staff members, and the difficulties that creates. What we've heard tonight, not necessarily totally conclusive, but an indication that as much as we need to invest on the special education side, we need to invest on the general ed side, particularly with regard to professional development for the gen ed teachers to have a greater understanding of the needs of disabled children and to offer them strategies for helping those kids. And that over time, there's reason to believe that doing so might reduce the need for certain special ed services for at least a portion of the population. So the question I have for you is, how should, when we're going through our budgeting process and it's basically a zero-sum game there, we don't have enough for both usually. Do you personally want to offer your philosophies about how we should think about that in the face of imperfect information about what we might be able to achieve through the gen ed improvements, but also facing a very concrete need on the special ed side in current days? So there's my unanswerable question for you, but I might as well throw it to you because we have to deal with it, and we even if you don't have a definitive answer, I think it'd be helpful to hear how you're thinking about that. So Jenny or Eliza, however you want to do it.
I can start. So what I'll say is that it's all important. You know, what we see in the data that we've presented and the data that you've seen in the other presentations this evening is that there is rising need for all students with and without disabilities. And I think there's a few points that are important to make. The anti-ableism work is essential to making our district a place where every student feels welcome, every student feels accepted, understood, That is something that is foundational and built into our vision for all of our kids, right? We want our kids with disabilities to feel the acceptance, and we want our other kids who don't have disabilities to understand them and accept them. It's a holistic, approach that needs to be taken for that. In making that happen, we have to make our classrooms universally designed. We have to make them affirming. But that doesn't, just because we make the environment, we mold it a little bit better for our students with disabilities, it doesn't mean that that reduces their need as outlined in their IEPs. Both must happen. Both must exist. MTSS is, I think the plans, the vision is incredible. I think it's multifaceted. It has all lots of resources that are being put into it, and rightfully so. But I think that we need to remember that we are in a very early stage of that implementation, and it's going to take a while for the fruit of all of that labor to materialize. So what do we do in the meantime? We can't forget the need of our students, right? Our students with disabilities have their IEPs for a reason that outlines services in a certain way at a certain intensity. And those have to be honored at not just a minimal compliance level, but at a level that matches with what we want for their futures and what we think is important for them as a whole human. So all of these things are priorities. How do you budget for that? I don't know. I think hard decisions have to be made, but I think, if we say invest more in MTSS and reduce, like we've seen in the last couple of years on the special ed side, there will be impacts as we've seen in these last couple of years. And so, we might be looking long-term for students that can be caught early now on the gen ed side and supporting them through the MTS system that is in development, but that's not going to help our current special needs students. They still have their needs. They still need to be responded to. So, I think the vision is great, but I think that it has to be a holistic discussion about all of these components at once to be able to figure out how to balance that. So I don't have the answer, but all I can say is that it's all important to the benefit of all of our kids.
I just want to amplify what has just been said, because there are going to be calls within the community that if you're proposing these MTSS type things and there are changes to enrollment, you have to cut somewhere before this takes root. And I just want us to know, to just say together that we cannot make cuts and look for efficiencies until we are solidly in the training and that the systems are rooted and the trust is there. Parents are not going to let go, nor should they, of services and IEPs for a tier 1 or tier 2 scenario that is not tried and true and proven. So we're in the testing ground now. So I just want to say that because we're all going to have to withstand that pressure in the next budget cycles.
And if I may, I think, if I may, what you've just said suggests an extraordinary need for real rigor in not only the design of those programs, but in the manner in which we choose to assess their success or failure. That will require, and I say this with great respect and affection for our faculty, our teachers, an understanding on their part that when we demand that rigor, particularly with regard to the assessment of the results, it is in no way a reflection of disrespect towards them as professionals. In other words, we're not doing it to say, gotcha, it didn't work. We're doing it to say, we're all together here conducting an experiment. We're trying to, in essence, use the scientific method to understand how to design a new approach and to evaluate it. And if it's not working, it's not a reflection on the people who are doing the work. It's that we've had a design problem or an implementation problem, and that we have to go on and engage in continuous improvement along those lines.
I haven't heard anything worrying about that with our staff. They wanted these same supports and strategies. And as evidenced by how geeked out on EduClimber everyone is, like so excited to have it, to actually track how are we doing with what we're doing and are we working smart and not just hard.
Yeah, good,
Mhm.
good.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks, Paul. Barry?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you. It was a great presentation. You all were my entree into anything related to school. You thoughtfully have educated me and continue to educate me. I've only been a part of being the liaison for a little bit, but I've appreciated the time and continue to look forward to your advocacy.
Thank you.
Amy?
I would just say that next year, I would really like to hear more about the actual rollout of the new IEP with a particular focus on how students and parents and caregivers experience that change, since DESE hasn't changed the IEP in like ever years. It feels like a big deal, and I think it would be a good area to hear about next year. And that I really see that your goals for looking ahead to school year 25 are so aligned with what I think our district's approach will be in terms of articulating a vision for a graduate that is really about all kinds of learners, and listening to the community. So I hope that it continues to feel aligned, because on paper, it really does look aligned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rajiv?
Just a thank you. Very much appreciated the communication, including during the strike, the advocacy, and very much appreciate what you do in your roles. And sorry again for keeping you waiting until nine something to do this. And then also a pitch for the CPAC Awards. It's a wonderful evening. This is the first time it's going to be back in person in 4 years, 5 years,
Before the
perhaps.
pandemic, yeah.
So, and it's an absolutely incredible event. We really get to celebrate not just our special educators, but general ed, school secretaries, everyone who goes, bus drivers, crossing guards, really members of our community who go above and beyond to support our students with disabilities who need that support, the inclusivity, and really the feeling of being part of the community. So it's a wonderful evening. I think we're all invited.
Yes.
Yes.
I was planning to show regardless.
Absolutely.
But just a pitch for trying to make it to that if at all possible. Thank
you.
Anyone else? I guess the one comment in looking at your report, and something I discussed with Dr. Nolan earlier today, was the next year, as we continue to build out this annual report concept for the district as a whole, to really take some of the pieces of information you have in here and incorporate that into a student services piece on our annual report. So just so you know, that discussion is happening, and
We also
now
are.
she's publicly on the spot. So
No, you don't scare me, Rusky. The DEI report also will be incorporated into the annual report. So the idea is to give you all of this comparative analysis. We have our dates picked for our elementary educators last week of June, secondary educators July 19th and 26th, to do the deep dive into their own schools. And just so everyone knows, feeder elementary schools with their receiving middle school principal, and then middle school principals with their high school counterparts, to share these patterns and experiences. And of course, there's a huge student services component. And so we're getting our house in order in this side so that we can share it with the community in a meaningful way. But I'm going to protect our first share for a little bit while everybody gets their muscles built. And, obviously we're in retreat, and I'll be sharing those pieces with you, but just know that we're learning new things and we're trying to be a system in a new way. And that can be scary for folks who don't have a lot of data experience and the kind of training. And so everybody's psyched, but cautious. And so I just want to let you know that our intentions are aligned with everything that's been said here today. I think one joy I just want to celebrate is, and I think this is like a testament to how real the relationship is between CPAC and the Office of Student Services. We were rejoicing in what your report said. So we felt, not because there's great news everywhere and we obviously have room to grow, but I hope you know that we felt that the way you reflected our work felt real to us and felt like an honest appraisal of how things hit the streets. And it was also honored the hard work of our staff. So I can't think of a better way to have a partnership than, you know, real tough love talk and also deep organic partnership. So thank you for modeling that, because I think this community needs to see more of that. You can ask hard questions and be demanding as a warm demander of us without having disagreement and dislike and despair. So I really appreciate you setting that tone.
Thank you.
We really do value your partnership. And, you know, even in talking about the data dives that you're going to do and how you're going to hold that close for a moment until you get, you know, everyone on the same page, we are here. We will review things from the parent perspective and give you some real feedback on how that resonates with us, or if it doesn't. So please, you know, reach out to us as well and let us know how we can be helpful to you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last item on the agenda for this evening is a district goals update from Dr. Nolan.
So good news is you've had a lot of goal 2 tonight already. So wowzers, we're good. What's also in goal 2 are all the coordinated instructional rounds that were conducted and the dates of those and the used. The new website that is being created for the district. I just need everyone to know that at the end of this year, our old vendor will go away, a new website will come. So I have just linked things directly here from the Google Docs for all of you, so that if that website goes away, you still have these materials, and we'll recreate it for the public as we change everything. So to that end, the curriculum pilot and review schedule is published. The curriculum page for families, the high school stuff is rolling in. So I just got social studies today. So more to come. We are going to undertake a process. Our new assistant superintendent for teaching and learning joined us today. We met with all our curriculum folks, K-8, to start to think about what is the common language for curriculum instruction and assessment. I've given you some samples of what we've created so far. You heard about MTSS, so that's a huge piece we can skip. And there was a question from a member today about how many schedules, what were we able to do in terms of schedules for all the buildings will be rescheduled. So we thought we would only do 5. We did all 15, and 5 will get the increased amount of support. And finally, there's the pieces about the technology mapping research study that comes to you on June 24th from Boston College, the results of the technology mapping. So that is oh, and you had the SEL presentation. So that's goal 2. So you've seen a presentation or have documents here for that. Section 4 is operations and long-range planning. So we are about to have that discussion about what are the inflection points that we are going to make to the community in the next 2 June meetings about long-range planning. All of the artifacts you asked the team for have been reviewed with you publicly, and they are linked into the goals document. So I sent you the neighborhood schools memo just as a refresher. Stephanie Gilman and I have been doing some work to just treat what are the key questions you must answer in the next couple of meetings. And I can make a recommendation to you for you to react to, or you can just make your own decisions. That's something I just need a little guidance on. Stephen is a major part of this goal 4. He has created a sustainability plan for technology, but of course he and I are going to wait and look at the Boston College report and make some decisions moving forward. He also made funding recommendations and staffing recommendations, which were not put in the FY25 budget. So those still stand. We completed a new food service program, and we will put structures in place to measure that. The last piece of this is the building projects, and I just want to thank Emily, Josh, Stephanie, the mayor and her team, Liam, Dave Stickney in ops and facilities, and our building principals, Principals Morse, Hurley, Chitty, Nardelli. Huge time commitment. I've been a building principal on a building project. It's huge. We have hit all the benchmarks we said we would in terms of completion of those meetings, and that is really an incredible achievement. In the bonus section of my evaluation document, I also shared with you some new metrics that Dave Stickney has put out for us. So custodial usage per square foot, and also work order completion. So you can see the type of work that he and his staff do and their completion rate, and sort of just an overall set of themes. That too will be incorporated into the type of annual report that you receive from us, just trying to give you something from every sector. And that concludes an overview of goal 4. Next up, goals 1 and 3. So I bet you can't wait.
Okay, any
And color coded, obviously.
Yes, I did color code it for things that were completed or half completed.
and any questions for Dr. Nolan? And I will say, so we plan to vote on the evaluation at our June 24th meeting. That has to be done by June 30th. Everyone has the DESI document to populate. If there is other aspects that you think we need to address outside of that you want to, please reach out to Emily or me and let us know that, so we can figure out how to do that, if that makes sense, and coordinate it all by that time. So Emily and I will need some time to, aggregate everything and put it in one coherent format before the 24th. Yes, Tamika.
So to that point, when would you like us to get them to you?
I mean, we haven't specifically said. What do you think, Emily?
Ideally around the first June meeting, so we have at least a week and a half.
So June 10th, ideally.
Yeah, that's kind of
Soft deadline.
Yeah, it's kind of where my head was at. If we have
I'd say hard deadline.
June 11th.
No, like the 13th or the 14th, just because it takes a while to do it.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking if we could get, at least, you can still have the right to reserve the right to change a thing here or there, but if we could get an initial document by that next meeting, Dr. Nolan's going to be presenting goals 1 and 3 at that meeting. If that changes anything, you always have the ability to change your submission. Nothing will be final until we put it all together. That sound fair?
Sounds good to me.
That's good. Paul.
I heard a question during your presentation.
Yes.
From my point of view, having you and present a framework for making those long-term decisions, I think would be really helpful. Or else we're going to have 9 different frameworks discussed at the meeting.
Well, I will give you a framework for questions. The question is, do you want me to make a recommendation to you about answers to some of the questions the frameworks provide?
I would personally, but I don't know how other people feel.
I would not. And the reason for that, sorry. And the reason for that is the framework would be incredibly helpful. The decision could go in the direction of the recommendation or in a different direction. And in either case, we'd have to work together to move forward with that. And I feel it would be good to have Dr. Nolan and the senior team in a position of helping to structure some of the decision making and what needs to be done, but not put them in a position where they had made a recommendation on something, we went in a different direction with some implication of then having to carry out something they had not recommended. So it's my personal thinking on that, obviously, but in regarding topics like neighborhood schools that are fraught for many reasons. I feel like we need to come up with, after what will probably be a lot of deliberation, to come up with a decision on several things.
Yeah, and to that point, I think we don't quite know exactly where this conversation is going to take us as a committee. I mean, this is a big, broad undertaking. Are we going to put that blueprint together of what we think this is supposed to look like over a period of time that's going to exceed all of us? Or do we think more narrowly about it? I think that's what's going to have to come out in the next couple meetings to kind of define the scope of this thing. There are acute questions that will need to be answered in the, let's call it, relative near term. And we will have to address those. But, I almost think of it in the same way we sort of entered into our discussion at the last meeting of, phones. Like, okay, is there going to be yonder pouches a day next year? And then the very big picture question of what can we do as a committee and as a institution to help better this situation? Much, much bigger, broader question. And we've sort of, addressed a little bit of that, and we narrowed, what we felt, I think, was the important piece to address in the more near term to intermediate term. So I would encourage us as a starting point to start sharing. I mean, we can't share it amongst ourselves, obviously, but start sharing with Dr. Nolan what your initial thoughts are on this and how you think about it. And that would be, at least one central place some of that information is going to help channel that discussion to the right place. I know I've already sent her lots of maps with circles drawn around them and all sorts of things. Yes. So, I think that's a good starting point, is to share that information with the administration and that can, get them thinking in the direction of, we might be more aligned than we think, or we might not be. Other thoughts on that topic? Go ahead, Emily.
I philosophically agree with Rajiv in terms of not getting a recommendation out the gate. And I also agree with what you said as well. So.
Anything else? Okay, so I think we have a pretty good game plan on moving forward with evaluation.
Just want to mention that we will need an executive session on the 10th for a legal update, just so everyone knows. Save us all an email.
Okay, perfect. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you everyone for your patience in a very long meeting, and we are adjourned.